Hello, and welcome to Clock Spinning, the podcast of Magic's history as told card by card through Cube. I'm Austin, and with me, as always, is Connor. How are you today, Connor?
I'm doing okay. I'm a little tired from doing some battling with my garden today.
What kind of battle? Like weeds?
With ants. Yeah, just fighting with them with neem oil and all kinds of stuff. So
Why are you trying to kick the ants out? I feel like ants are a benevolent presence most of the time.
but they're too close to the house, you know. They're not benevolent once they get inside.
I see. Are they crossing over? Have they made it across that Rubicon?
They haven't yet, but you know how they do.
Yeah, well, we grew up in a sort of ant. We were really just kind of secondary citizens within an ant kingdom growing up.
Yeah, we were just sort of off in our own little spaces,
Right.
surrounded by ants
Right.
doing whatever they wanted. So
Yeah, they dominated the house. They set the schedule.
yeah.
They did help pay a lot of the bills, so that was great.
I mean, there were a lot of them, so you'd hope they'd be able to at least help out.
Chip in. Yeah, I hope this banter is making sense to somebody besides us. It's been a little obscure as I'm getting into it.
To someone who's had ants before.
So for anyone who's new and who made it through the Ant Talk, Clock Spinning is a podcast where we're going card by card through some of the most classic and fun Magic sets and building cubes out of them. And so right now, we're in the middle of Champions of Kamigawa set and Champions of Kamigawa block. And we're reviewing every single card one by one for cube in general, but for our cube in particular. If you want to follow along with that cube, you can go to clockspinning.com and there's a link to the cube and blog posts that contain links to all the old episodes. We would recommend jumping back to episode 1, if only to hear about an overview of the set and about the IMPAB rating system we use to rate the cards and decide how many we're going to put into the cube.
And actually, we're kind of coming toward the end of Champions of Kamigawa. It's hard to believe, but
I know.
We're going through the first half of Green today, and then not that much left before we move on to Betrayers.
That's right. We're going to be reviewing our 201st card in just a second.
Yeah.
All right. Well, should we jump in and start talking about Green?
Let's do it.
Okay, so first up is the iconic Azusa, Lost but Seeking. Azusa is 2 and a G for a 1/2 legendary creature, human monk. You may play 2 additional lands on each of your turns. Very straightforward card, but a very, very splashy card. I think it's fair to say this is one of the most iconic cards from the set, certainly one of the most iconic green cards from the set. This has seen play in a whole bunch of formats for a long time. In Commander, for example, it commands only 1,000 decks, but it appears in 44,000, which is a lot. Played in about 4.5% of cubes, or 2,500 on Cube Cobra. So this thing sees a ton of play, and I think it's fair to say it's a multi-format, maybe not all-star, but solid role player. To be honest, in our cube, I'm less convinced about what Azusa is able to do. I just don't think you're that set up to accumulate lands in hand. Like, I feel like the problem, at least in our Triple Champions test drafts, is not your ability to cast your creatures with the land you have in hand. It's more like you just don't have enough total mana to do everything you want, and there's not enough card advantage to get more lands. I don't know. I'm not convinced about Azusa. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sold on her relevance in our cube as kind of as iconic as she is. Maybe the best case scenario that popped into my mind was you have Azusa, you have a whole bunch of land in your hand, and you have a Hana Kami or something. And this lets you ramp that out. But the thing is, the problem isn't so much playing out the land that you already have, it's getting the land that you need out of your deck into your hand, which Azusa doesn't help with, and there are not that many cards in Kamigawa that are going to do that for you. As cool as she is, I'm just not really sure what purpose she would serve.
Well, you say that, but I do see in the notes here you had a kind of cool, obscure purpose that I'd love you to highlight.
Yeah, so she does combo with the Moonfolk in an interesting way. The Soratami that we looked at back in blue and the ones that we'll see in the sets coming up, rely on bouncing your own lands to your hand to trigger their abilities. So Azusa obviously helps you get those back out. And she does work very well with the bounce lands from Ravnica.
Oh, interesting.
Which, I think we're giving a little bit of consideration to for more mana fixing.
I love that. Yeah. So for anyone who's not following the bounce land bit of that, so I'd say at this point, we're basically locked in that we're not going to run only Kamigawa lands in our Kamigawa queue because they're frankly just bad. They're really pretty bad lands across the board. They don't allow you to play 2-color decks with any degree of effectiveness. And for me, and I think both of us really believe like a fun cube environment lets you play out your spells, makes it easy to cast your spells and you don't lose too much due to mana screw and color screw. And so we've been thinking about like, well, what lands do we include? And a couple people on Reddit suggested the bounce lands from Ravnica, which have interesting synergies with like the Moonfolk. They have interesting synergies with, or anti-synergies with all the land destruction effects. They just do lots of fun, unique things in the context of the block. And I like your call out with Azusa. I think, yeah, this would play really interestingly with the bounce lands.
To me, those are kind of enough reasons to keep her in for now. Just, at one copy, as we've done with almost all the legendaries. I don't see like the dream scenario of having Azusa and then a ton of land and getting some monstrous creature out, because there just aren't that many very expensive, very good creatures to play.
I like your thinking there, though, that like with the bounce lands and like if we design the mana base in the right way, that this gets a little bit better. One of the things I've noticed in test games is you do get stuck on mana a surprising amount in this format, considering how slow it is. And I think it's because things tend to be expensive. It's not so much that you're trying to cast 7 drops all the time. It's that a lot of times your hand is like a 3-drop, a 4-drop, and another 3-drop, right? And you have 5 mana and you just can't quite square the circle. And so in that scenario, if we run the bounce lands and in enough density, like Azusa becomes a really interesting way to double spell on a turn where you otherwise had no business double spelling.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I guess she does stay in. I see you had her at meh. I had her at playable.
I still think she's a meh, to be honest. I mean, because so we didn't even talk about the stat line, which might be telling. The stat line here is pretty embarrassing, even by Kamigawa standards. Like a 3-mana 1/2 does not. She almost might as well be an enchantment, and she might even be better if she was.
Ouch. Actually, now that you mention it, at first I said Azusa's effect was really cool and unique. And then I was thinking, is it actually unique? Like, I know there are plenty of cards out there that let you play 1 additional land per turn, but I was wondering how many let you do 2. And it looks like if I constructed this search in the right way, it looks like there are 3 other cards that let you play 2 or more additional lands, and all 3 of them are sorceries.
Huh.
So Azusa does stand alone in being able to, being a creature that's able to do this. There's like Nahiri's Lithoforming, which is XRR sorcery.
It's a deep cut.
Lets you play X additional lands this turn.
Wow. I got to look this up. I've never heard of this.
It does some other stuff too, but that was the part that I was focused on. It's sacrifice X lands. For each land sacrificed this way, draw a card. You may play X additional lands this turn. Lands you control enter the battlefield tapped. So that's kind of a drawback.
That is a freaking weird card. I like it.
But yeah, there's a lot going on in it.
One of the things I like about Kamigawa, if I'm honest, is it doesn't make me think quite as hard as modern cards just to understand what the card does.
True.
Like Azusa does one thing. Like the thing you just read out, this bulk rare from Zendikar Rising, literally does 4 different things.
That's an interesting point, because on the same page I'm looking at like a Planeswalker, Kiora the Crashing Wave, who's not that complicated. But just thinking about something like Planeswalker or Saga or these class cards that were in the D&D set, like individual modern cards, modern meaning like recent ones, are so much more complicated and have so much more going on just within one card than almost any of the ones that we've seen. Like these Kamigawa cards kind of make you think about which other cards you need to pair them with, and need to like, what do you need to make Azusa relevant in Kamigawa Limited? Whereas you look at a Planeswalker and there's so many different things going on. You're trying to figure out just how to use this one card in the right way.
Yeah, I struggle with this because I don't want to be the curmudgeon person who's like, I hate change. It was better in my day. I really don't. And there's a lot I like about modern Magic. And honestly, I struggle a little bit to internalize modern cards sometimes. Like, as you were talking about that and Planeswalkers, I thought of, the new Tameo from Neon Dynasty. Mm-hmm. The one who costs 2 and a G and a U and a Phyrexian GU hybrid mana. And, that card has... This isn't a Neon Dynasty review, but I just want to read it to like emphasize and count how many abilities it has, because I think it's interesting. So first, she's got completed, so she can be paid for with G, U, or 2 life. If you paid with life, she enters with 2 or fewer loyalty counters. So that's 1 or 2 abilities, depending how you want to count it. or at least one or two thoughts. Then her +1 says tap one artifact or creature, up to one target artifact or creature. It doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So that's another like 3 or 4 thoughts there, right? Because it's up to one, which is interesting. That's a little bit of extra cognitive overhead if you have to flip that around in your head and go, oh, that's so I can plus it without having a valid target. That's good for me. You know, like you have to absorb that. Then her -X says exile target non-land permanent card with the mana value X from your graveyard. Create a token that's a copy of that card. So that's, I don't know, another pretty dense ability. And then finally, her -7 is create Tamiyo's Notebook, a legendary colorless artifact token with spells you cast cost 2 less to cast and tap draw a card. So she, as her minus, creates an artifact that already in Kamigawa would do more than most Kamigawa artifacts do on their own.
Oh man.
Yeah, sorry, that's a long diversion, but it really is interesting, like just the level of complexity on an individual card in modern Magic compared to, you know, this 18-year-old form of Magic. It really is a different game in the sense that this is, as you're saying, much more about relatively simple pieces of cardboard interacting, you know, in hopefully complex emergent ways.
Yeah.
Okay, and as a reminder for anyone who's wondering, we landed on a meh 1X or a playable 1X?
I'm fine with meh.
All right, well, we'll
I'm a little dizzy from Tamiyo, so we better just keep moving here.
I know that was a discussion almost as complex as Tamiyo.
Yeah.
All right, you want to carry us on?
Yeah, let's move on to a relatively complicated card.
I think our most complex card of the day, actually.
Probably. This is Budoka Gardener, 1G for a 2/1 human monk. It's a flip card, so you can tap Budoka Gardener to put a land card from your hand into play. And then if you control 10 or more lands, flip him. He flips into Dokai, Weaver of Life, who's a 3/3 human monk. And Dokai has 4 GG and tap. Put an XX green elemental creature token into play, where X is the number of lands you control. So Dokai is a little bit like Tamiyo. He's creating tokens and counters and stuff. But I love this card. I think this is a really exciting flip card. One of the coolest flip forms in the block, meaning creature that the gardener flips into. Just the idea of being able to put out a 10/10 or bigger elemental every single turn is pretty tempting.
Yeah, I really like this guy too. It's kind of funny because I feel like individually, minus making a 10/10, individually, most of the abilities here are a little bit marginal, or most of the elements. So it's a 2-mana 2/1, and that's pretty meh, even in this set. That's, 2-mana 2/1, especially in green, is nothing to get excited about. And then his ability, of putting a land from your hand into play is kind of funny because it reads like a ramp, but I would say it isn't really ramp because it depends on you having lands in your hand. It has the same Azusa problem of he doesn't help you get more lands. And so I think he probably buys you 1 or 2 land drops, early land drops, tops. But for the most part, it's flavor text in the mid game until if the game goes on forever, you just win, right? Like if you were making a 10/10 every turn, you are winning that game. Like there's no question in this format that you're winning that game.
You kind of have the option here of either having the gardener contribute to his own transformation or maybe just hanging out in your hand or in your deck until you draw him in a late game and then just play him and flip him as soon as possible. Like a lot of the other flip cards, you have to sort of set it up and think about how you're going to create the circumstances. Just don't have to do that here.
Yeah, he's also one of the few cards in the set, I think, really, that does the thing a lot of modern Magic cards do, where it's basically always good. Modern Magic cards are almost always good. A good example would be like Lion Sash from Neon Dynasty is like a 2-mana 2/2 that's also an equipment to boost a creature once it's no longer relevant, and it manages graveyards, and it slices and dices. Like it does a bunch of stuff, so it's almost always relevant. And that's how modern Magic threats tend to be. And this has a little bit of that, of like early game, it's a 2-mana 2/1. It can like hold down the forward or slow down the game or get in. And then late game, it takes over. Now, mid game, he's kind of at sea a little bit.
That's where he's weak.
Yeah, he's like, I don't really play in that. I've only got 2 sides. I don't have 3 sides. Do you think next time they return to Kamigawa, they should make flip cards that also are transform cards?
I think they should just have 3-sided triangular cards that would have 3 forms on one face.
The Transformers TCG had 3-sided cards. Or was that Duel Masters? Yeah, one of the other Wizards TCGs has 3-sided cards.
I thought Duel Masters had like 5-sided cards.
Oh, probably.
That was kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm pretty impressed by this guy. I have him at a playable 1X.
Exact same here.
Wow. Boom. Yeah, well, I guess a little more comment on the play. So this appears in 4,600 decks on EDH Rec, which isn't nothing. It's not amazing, but it's not nothing. It's only in 0.66% of cubes. It's only in 365 cubes on Cube Cobra, which honestly, I think is a little bit low. I don't think this guy's amazing, but I feel like in a lower powered environment, he's a pretty fun, unique threat. I feel like he should get a shot in more places.
Yeah, I wonder if a lot of people's cubes, the games just don't go on long enough.
Until you have 10 lands.
Yeah.
10 is a lot of lands. We should be clear that, there's a lot of games this guy's never flipping. But what I like is in the games where he's most at risk of not flipping, like against mono white, he can help block or like trade with an Isamaru or something. So he's doing a little bit for you, even in the games where he's not at his best.
Yeah. He's not a 4-mana 1/1 like our red flip cards.
Yeah. Where do you land on the art for this thing?
I think it's okay. It's another Kev Walker, and he's been honestly a kind of a disappointment in Champions for me.
It's not been his strongest set, has it?
No.
Besides, what was it? He Who Hungers that we really liked?
Yeah. He Who Hungers was good. Both sides of it are fine, I guess. Not that interesting, but fine. I kind of like this tree that's weaving between both sides. Kind of cool.
I feel like that's clearly the strongest element of the art is that cool tree. It's kind of funny that the tree is in spring with the young monk and dying with the old. I mean, a lot of these kind of have an age theme to them, so that makes sense, I guess. But I feel like Dokai is the weaver of life. Like, why does he get a dead tree?
Maybe he's taking the life out of the tree to make it into an elemental.
Maybe that's just how things are now that the Kami have turned against the mortals.
Yeah, maybe.
There's a lot packed into this art. There's a little banner that the young monk's carrying. Dokai is creating some kind of spirit thing. Okay. Yeah, but I think this guy's a playable 1X. I'm always excited when we find a playable flip card. That's a really good feeling every time.
It is.
All right, let's go to Burr Grafter. Burr Grafter is 3 and a G for a 2/2 creature spirit. Sack him. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And he has Soul Shift 3. And this is our first Soul Shift card in a while, actually. So as a reminder, Soul Shift says, when this dies, you may return target spirit card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to your hand.
For Soul Shift 3, it says that.
Yeah, for Soul Shift 3. Thank you. I really like this guy. I think I've always loved this guy. I like pump spells in general. I like death shenanigans. Honestly, this reminds me a little bit of Briarhorn, which has always been a pet card of mine. In my cube, for example, I've run Briarhorn since the start. I don't think anyone except me has ever put it in a deck, but I feel like every time I do, Briarhorn kind of overperforms. As a reminder, if you're not familiar, Briarhorn is 3 and a G for a 3/3 with Flash. And when it enters, target creature gets +3/+3, and it also evokes for 2.
Almost absolutely better.
Briarhorn?
Yeah.
It's way better. And I think this thing's not like completely far off. Obviously, having Flash is good. Obviously, having Evoke and coming in at 2 is good. Obviously, your opponent not knowing it's coming. Those things are all great. But this guy has Soul Shift. So some additional value going on there.
This was one of those cards that I really struggled to understand when we started playing this game. I was 12 when this set came out. And the idea of sacrificing something like willingly giving up one of your own cards felt like such a huge price to pay. And conceptually, this card especially felt like I'm giving up this permanent 2/2 for a temporary 2/2. And, I didn't really connect the dots that with damage on the stack, with this having Soul Shift 3, what you're really getting is 4/4 worth of stats with flexibility on 2/2 of that, plus the soul shifting. And I just, it was really hard for me to understand like why I wouldn't just want like a 4-mana 3/3 instead of this. And that for whatever reason, that just like took me a long time to figure out as a young player.
I love that. Yeah, it's cards were harder to evaluate in this era, I feel like. Like there's a lot of cards that play better than they look, which I feel like is something Wizards consciously avoids now. Maybe mostly for good, because it is kind of Magic is a very complicated game. And so saying like, not only do you need to learn how to play it, not only do you need to learn how to play it well, but there will be many cards that will persistently seem like bad cards to you as a player for maybe years, even though they're actually very good, like is hard. And, it is fun. It's fun when you unlock that and you understand, oh, here's how Burr Grafter actually is a really solid card that can show up and do work in a variety of circumstances and has flexibility. Like just the value of flexibility is huge. And Burr Grafter gives you that. And once you've committed it to the board, it's just sitting there ready to be used, messing with your opponent's combat math kind of continually, which I think is honestly like a very real kind of equity you can get.
A frustrating one, but yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah.
That's a big part of the game though,
And I think the art here is really fun. I like it.
Yeah. It's you want to try and describe?
Yeah, it's so hard describing these Kami. So it's like a kind of a plant man, I guess you would say, emerging from a pond, and his head is like a kind of flower, like, you know, one of those little Chinese lantern flowers. It's kind of like that, full of glowing
Mm.
orange magic. And then there's orange sparks cascading off of him, and it's just very colorful and very evocative and kind of humanoid, but not in a way that's hits just the right level of disturbing for me to be really kind of otherworldly and fairy-like. I think it's a really, really strong piece of Kami art. Incidentally, if you're following along, I don't think we've mentioned this yet. There'll be a link in the show notes to a Scryfall search that shows all of the cards. So you don't have to just try to imagine this art. As we try to describe these Kami, you can also pull it up and look at it.
You know, I'm just realizing this as I look at this art again now as a full-grown adult. I think his head is a burr.
Duh!
Right?
Yes, you're totally right.
It's a burr, like one of those spiky little seed things that gets stuck to your socks.
It's amazing that it's taken me 18 years to understand the card called Burr Grafter might have a burr in its art.
We've finally cracked it.
Whew, wow. See, this whole podcast is worth doing just for this lightning bolt moment.
Yeah. And, you know, hopefully we've enlightened someone else who was always confused by Burr Grafter.
You know, and at that point, the art even gets better because A, it's a burr, which is cool. That connection is cool. But then B, it's like, I understand what the glowiness is about because he can sacrifice his head, you know, his most essential essence to kind of transfer that power. You could see the transfer of power almost in the art.
Yeah. Yeah. He's sort of like disintegrating and all this orange magic is coming out of him.
Yeah. I'm looking at the artist here, Heather Hudson, and I'm not super familiar with her work. It looks like she's done a lot of pieces. She's done 198, and honestly, a lot of them are, in my view, a little bit forgettable, if I'm honest, but she's got some hits, especially in this set. Like she did Kodama's Reach, you know, which has to be one of the most iconic arts of all time. She did Harsh Deceiver, which is not a good card, but has pretty solid art. So I feel like the set played to her strengths.
Yeah.
She's done a lot of birds. She's just like Suntail Hawk, birds. Stormscape Familiar, another Suntail Hawk. She did Standstill. Okay, I'm gonna have to look more at Heather Hudson later. So where do you come down on this? I had this as a playable 3X. I'm starting to think 3X might be high because 4 is a really crowded slot in every color, but especially in green with like the Kodamas and stuff. Where do you come down?
Yeah, that's a good point. I also had it at playable 3.
Wow, we're so aligned today.
I know. We'll see how long it lasts.
Yeah. I'm looking ahead.
Yeah,
just a little bit.
I guess we start with 2. You know, this is it's a solid card. It's satisfying design in its own way, but I feel like there's more exciting things that we're going to want more of at 4.
Yeah, and this is totally the kind of card where if we want more of it, we can throw more in. If there were only one of it, no one's going to be heartbroken. So I think 2 is a nice place to start.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Okay. Next up, we have Commune with Nature. G, for a sorcery, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. I don't think this is an amazing card, but I think that if you're sort of decently invested in green, you have enough creatures that this is maybe worthwhile just to be able to pull one out of, you know, what's going to be a smaller deck than you'd have it constructed. The fact that this can only pull out a creature is kind of a bummer, but I mean, I think there's something here.
Yeah, I want to do a little kind of tour of the history of green 1-mana cantripy effects, because I promise this connects back to the playability of this card. So this is actually the first proper green cantrip, and I'm defining cantrip here as a card that gets you another card with some card selection and that costs 1 mana. So I'm being fairly prescriptive. You know, I'm talking about the preordained brainstorm type cards here. So there was one card in Alpha, Natural Selection, that kind of tried to do something like this, but it doesn't actually give you any choice or like cards. It just lets you look at it and rearrange cards. It also has one of the silliest arts in the history of Magic. So if you've never looked at it, look up Natural Selection from Alpha and look at the bird Tiger Man admiring an apple.
It's pretty great.
It's glorious. That's the first one, sort of, is 1995's Natural Selection. Then we have a 9-year gap with none of these effects, and we come to this card, Commune with Nature, in 2004. As far as I know, this card didn't do anything or make any kind of splash. 6 years after that, in 2010, we get Ancient Stirrings in Rise of the Eldrazi, which I would say is the first good green cantrip effect. You know, that card has been a defining card in Modern for a long time. I think it eventually got banned in Modern. It's just an extremely powerful card that's showed up in many effects, decks, particularly Tron, across formats. Then we have another huge gap. So we had a 9-year gap and a 6-year gap, and then we have a 7-year gap to commune with dinosaurs in Ixalan, which gets you a dinosaur. It looks at the top, I can't remember, 5 or 4, gets you a dinosaur or a land, and that's the critical thing that changes starting in Ixalan. Then we have Adventurous Impulse in 2018, Dominaria. Looks at the top 3 and gets a creature or a land. So it's this card, looks at less, but gets a land, can also get you a land. 2021, we get Abundant Harvest in MH2, which is my favorite of these and the best. And then in Neon Dynasty, we get Commune with Spirits, which incidentally, considering the set's emphasis on spirits, I can't believe this card isn't called Commune with Spirits, which is this card that can also get a land or a creature or enchantment. Okay, so that's a long discussion, but I go into it because I think it's kind of fun, and to see how this has accelerated in the last 5 years and become a kind of common effect in Green after a long time of being very intermittent. But B, to say, I think not hitting a land here, to my view, makes this an insta-cut, because the no-hit rate is so real here, and the card selection is often not card selection. There's going to be a ton of times you flip up 5 and you sometimes get 0 creatures, but often get 1 creature, maybe 2. And so you're not getting that much choice out of your commune with nature. And I think a lot of times you'd be happier if you just put in another creature where your commune with nature is, which is a guaranteed hit. So I don't know. I'm pretty cold on this card.
Well, I mean, if you have a creature instead of your commune with nature, it's a guaranteed hit if you're assuming that the creature's, showing up in the same spot in the deck as commune with nature. But don't you think there's a little bit of value in just looking at 5 cards and what is probably going to be, a 20 to 30 card deck that you're looking through? Don't you think there's some value in looking at 20% of that deck and getting a creature out of that instead of drawing 3 land if you play this later in the game?
Well, I mean, let's do the math. So let's say you have, I don't know, what's the typical number of creatures in a limited environment? Let's say 18, maybe. Let's say you have 18 creatures. Well, we know you're running at least 1 non-creature from Commune with Nature. So let's say you have 18 creatures, 40 card deck, and it's turn 4. So you've got 30 cards left in your deck. And let's just assume you've drawn a quarter of your creatures. So that's about 4. So you've got 12 left out of 30. Okay, here's where the math gets kind of hard. So you're seeing a sixth of your deck. So on average, you're going to see about 2 creatures. You're probably going to see between 1 and 3. Is getting a choice of 2 creatures really that good? Like, let's say the 2 creatures are a Dripping Tongue Zubera and I don't know, what was the Budoka? We've only looked at a couple creatures so far, so we have a limited to play with. Our Dripping Tongue Zubera and Burr Grafter. Wouldn't you rather have just had a Burr Grafter than this card, like from the start?
I mean, I would if I'm able to draw the Burr Grafter, but I think the value here is getting a creature when you need one.
But what if you don't hit and you just threw away a card?
It's only 1 mana.
Yeah, but it was 1 whole card.
I don't think this is that great, and not being able to get at least something out of it in the form of a land is a bummer.
This is an interesting card because it's a testing card. Like, I don't know. I feel like we can test it and see. I think it's going to be pretty clear pretty quick if this card is the real deal or not, or any kind of deal or not. I'm okay including it to find out. I just, my suspicion is the fail rate here is high.
Why don't we keep it in at meh so that we know it's kind of on a watch list?
Mm-hmm.
I think there might be something here.
Okay, how many copies do you want? I'm gonna let you govern this one.
I think 2 is probably reasonable.
Okay, 2 meh. Let's find out. Before we move on, talk about the art.
This may be the worst art for me. The worst art that we've seen in the over 200 cards we've talked about already.
It's really bad.
It is so. I mean, this looks like something from like the first 2 to 3 years of Magic, and not in a good way. The subject of the art is a woman who is communing with an eagle, a bald eagle that she has on her arm. The woman doing the communing is so stiff and awkward. Like, it looks like this creepy doll head. Yeah. By the way, she has no like iris or pupils in her eyes, I guess because she's communing. Yeah. Her eyes are just blank and white.
Which really accentuates the lifeless, dead quality.
It really does. Pose. And she looks very lifeless and just not like a nice person who would be communing with an eagle. It's like a creepy doll head was screwed onto this green cone, which is her body wearing this green robe. And then it looks like someone glued some hands onto that cone at really awkward angles. And then you look at this eagle that she's communing with, and I would say if we're being generous to this eagle, it looks like it was taxidermied and just clamped onto her arm. And if we're not being generous to this eagle, it looks like someone just spilled brown and white paint onto the canvas at the end and then just added a beak and an eye to it to make it into an eagle. It is so bad.
It really is. The background's all right.
That's the best part.
It's an example of where I don't have the art language to describe it, but one of the gifts of a really good artist is one of the hardest things for me to understand is how you impart a sense of motion to a still image. And you can see it in other things like Azusa, Budoka Gardener, even
Burr Grafter.
Burr Grafter. Yeah, like so many of these other cards, like there's just something about them that suggests, even Humble Budoka coming up a little bit later, which is not an amazing piece, but it's fine. There's just something about it that has a kind of lifelike quality where you can imagine the motion, you can imagine some kind of animation. And despite the fact she's kind of doing a theoretically dynamic pose by lifting her hand, there's just this like stiff quality to it that just, I don't know, she looks frozen in amber. She just doesn't look alive.
Yeah, and this two-dimensional eagle just makes it so much worse.
Yeah, Edward P. Beard Jr. has done 126 cards in the history of Magic. His last pieces were just a set later than this, or a block later than this in Ravnica. He hasn't done any art since then. And as I look back through his art, I can kind of see why. Like, I think he was a very early Magic artist, and I don't think his style and his kind of technical chops quite made the leap into the kind of later Magic era. Like, he just doesn't. His style didn't work for this stuff. He did do the original Elder Dragons, including that hilarious Nicole Bolas art where he's reading a book and like looks like he's about to take a sip of tea. So he had some early bangers, but I think as Magic's art got increasingly realistic, his style just wasn't able to keep pace. Photorealism is not his strong suit, I think, based on this art.
Yeah, I wonder if this card was a turning point in his art career at Wizards.
Oh no,
they saw this one and they're like,
Well, it's funny you say it because I'm looking at his other art in the set. He has 3 other pieces in the set. They are Manicism, which we already talked about and we're not fans of. Ronin Houndmaster, which I don't recall having any reaction to, either good or bad. It's fine.
It's fine.
And then Strength of Cedars coming up this set, which I actually think is pretty cool. And interestingly is the least photorealistic of the 3. It's much more back towards this sort of painterly abstract art. And I think it worked better.
Oh yeah, that one's kind of fine.
It's kind of fine. It feels interesting and telling that this card got 3 reprints. I think as Wizards tried to make it a thing. Admittedly, 2 of those are Mystery Booster. Actually, got 1 reprint in 10th edition. And when they reprinted it, despite the pretty generic art here, like this could work anywhere. I mean, it's vaguely Japanese looking, but not strongly.
Except for the bald eagle.
But anyway, when this got reprinted in 10th edition, it got new art, which I don't think is a coincidence. New and much better art.
Yeah. That new art's pretty good.
Cool art, yeah. Dang.
Dino guy back there or a dragon or something.
Yeah, nice job, Lars Grant West. Okay, all right. So Meh 2X.
Yes.
All right. We're really on a journey today, aren't we?
We are. A slow journey, but bear with us.
All right, let's talk about Dosan, the Falling Leaf. 1 GG for a legendary creature, human monk. He's a 2/2. Players can play spells only during their own turns. Easy peasy. I was originally pretty cool on this card, and I'm glad someone on Reddit said, Tap said, helps you play combat tricks without getting blown out. And the more I thought about that, the more I thought, that's not nothing. There are some really good G combat tricks, notably Kodama's Might and Strength of Cedars are both very, very strong spells, especially Strength of Cedars. And then coming up in Betrayers, we have Unchecked Growth, which isn't quite as good, but is another solid pump spell. And then there's an additional use case of defending against your opponent's combat tricks, defending against an opponent messing up something like Devouring Greed or Devouring Rage. I think kind of putting all this together, Dosan isn't amazing, but I think his ability is more relevant than it seems. Like I'm thinking about Teferi, Time Raveler, the 1WU one that forces your opponent to play at sorcery speed. That's, screwed up multiple formats and is one of the most annoying cards ever entered into Vintage Cube.
Mm-hmm.
And this has a similar, it's not as good a card, but it's disruptive and I think matters in the same way that card matters more than it seems like it would.
Yeah. I think this is genuinely solid in it for whatever reason. Dosan really reminds me of Azusa. I think because they're both at 3, they're both, sort of these legendary humans within green, but I think Dosan is a lot more generally useful than Azusa. You don't really have to find other things to have him help you. The combat tricks are like being able to know you'll get the value out of Kodama's Might or Strength of Cedars or whatever is great. And I think he in a weird way kind of makes auras a little bit better too, because if you already have him out and you play the aura, at least for that turn, you're not gonna go down 2 cards to some Glacial Ray or whatever.
Yeah, it's a good point. The one knock against Dosan obviously is the kind of stat line. He's a 3 mana 2/2, so he's a gray ogre with double designated in his cost instead of single designated. That's a tough spot to be. I don't want anyone to pretend otherwise, but I think it's just barely not embarrassing enough that he can squeak in.
Yeah, and I think green is good enough as a color that like mono green actually may be viable. And if you're in green, I feel like it is likely to be kind of the more dominant color in your deck. So I think it's not as much of a drawback as it would be if he were in red, for example.
Yeah, I'm pretty surprised given the kind of evergreen relevance of his ability. I'm really surprised this thing's never been reprinted. It shows up, I can't remember the exact play number, but it shows up in a decent number of commander decks. But and therefore I'm just surprised they've never, say, thrown this into a commander deck. This seems like a really relevant thing. Kind of an annoying thing, I guess, but something that would totally make sense for a mono green deck in Commander.
Yeah, that is kind of weird. There's a lot of cards like that in Kamigawa. There's some that really surprise you, or surprise me at least, that they've been reprinted, and then there's other ones like Dosan where it seems like you could just kind of throw them in anywhere you wanted in terms of a reprint, and it'd be fine.
Yeah, so he appears in 3,600 decks, which isn't nothing. It's not amazing, but it's something. He commands just 56, which, doesn't surprise me. I'm surprised it's even that much, to be honest with you. Huh. Okay, so where do you land on playability here? I have this at a meh 1x.
I had him at playable, but I don't know, it's tough to evaluate because I feel like he's, if you do have those combat tricks in your deck, if you do have something that you're, really trying to protect, and your opponent also is running a deck that actually wants to play things on your turn, then he is going to be really useful. But if both of those things aren't true, he's just kind of a 3 mana 2/2. So maybe he does need to be meh.
Yeah, meh feels right to me here.
Sorry, Dosan.
Yeah, meh 1x, I assume.
Yeah. Next up, just a quick one, Dripping Tongue Zubera. 1G for a 1/2 Zubera Spirit. When it dies, put a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token into play for each Zubera put into a graveyard from play this turn. So we already covered Dripping Tongue Zubera and all the other Zubera in our Zubera special.
Woo!
So go back and listen to that if you haven't already, if you want to hear maybe a little too much about Zuberas.
No, Connor, sell it. This is the most in-depth podcast discussion of the Zuberas ever recorded.
Yeah, and I think it will remain so.
I think so
for years to come.
Yeah, I don't think too many people are muscling in on that territory of an in-depth Zubera cube review.
Not yet, but it is fun. Go give it a listen if you haven't been able to yet. So we already rated Dripping Tongue Zubera in that special episode, and we settled on 3 copies at playable.
Yeah, that still feels totally right to me. To me, this is my first or second favorite Zubera. It just always is a solid role player. The little spirit it ends up creating helps you out. It gives you nice fodder for things like Devouring Greed or Devouring Rage or other sack effects. Like, I just really like this guy.
Yeah, just really solid, and even just by himself, kind of replacing himself with a 1/1 spirit is just solid. I think this is my favorite Zubera art-wise. I just like that Dripping Tongue.
Yeah.
All these veiny kind of branches that he's composed of. I like how it looks. There's a little more context to the background of this Zubera as compared to the others. It looks like he's sort of creeping through this really dense undergrowth of the jungle.
It's kind of a Predator vibe.
Yeah.
Like the movie. Yeah, I can't say I like the art exactly, but I admire it intellectually.
Oh, okay.
I think it's well executed, but too gross for me.
We'll take it.
All right. Let's go to Feast of Worms. So Feast of Worms is 3 GG for a sorcery arcane. Destroy target land. If that land is legendary, its controller sacrifices another land. So I think this thing is terrible. I think it's really, really bad. I actually spent most of my time reading it thinking it was a 4-mana spell, and it was only at the end of my ratings that I realized it's 5, and so it's even worse than I
saw
thought.
in your comments there. You're like, 4 mana is just too much.
Yeah, quiet. There's other 4-mana land destruction spells. So the base rate for land destruction is 3. And usually, even at 3, it struggles to be playable in a cube type environment or even in limited. So when you go above 3, I expect some return. So at 4 in green, for example, we have cards like Bramble Crush, Creeping Mold, Reclaiming Vines, all of which hit multiple permanent types, or in some cases, all permanent types except creatures. Or they come with upside cards like Monvuli Acid Moss, which kills a land and then gets you a forest. I just think the legendary thing here is way, way too marginal to matter most of the time. There's not that many legendary lands. I don't know how many of them are going to make the cut. I don't know how often your opponent's even going to have one. And then also, even as a fan of land destruction, the rare times that this would be good enough, it's pretty unfun to have 2 of your lands destroyed. So I don't know. I hate this card.
Yeah, I gave it a meh 2x, mostly because I keep thinking about this land destruction sort of mini archetype that we've been bouncing around. But I think you're probably right that this is just bad. And it's not just bad because it's unfun, not just bad because it's 5 mana, but because the second land that this gets rid of is one that your opponent chooses.
I know, right? Why not just let you choose the second one too?
Yeah, the biggest upside you can get here is targeting a legendary land, and then you get to take out another one with it, but your opponent gets to choose. And they're only going to get rid of the land that hurts them the least. So the upside here is really almost nothing.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I do like the name. I think Feast of Worms is a pretty fun, evocative name. I wonder if it was inspired by the Diet of Worms, that I don't remember exactly enough from history to remember what happened, but it was something important in, I want to say, the Protestant Reformation. But anyway, I wonder if like Mark Rosewater or somebody was riffing off of Diet of Worms and they're like, Feast of Worms, that would be a great card name.
I was just thinking when I saw this name that I was really glad they didn't give this one to Ron Spencer. Because it would be so much grosser if they had.
Thank goodness. For anyone who's not tracking that, if you go back to our Black episode or just look at Ron Spencer's art on Black cards over the years, he is not afraid to get really, really gross with anything tangentially involving worms or bugs.
Yeah. So I'm very grateful that the worms in this, they're almost cute. They're like
kind of cute.
They look like, gummy, kind of fat gummy worms or little totally stuffed animals. They're just like these big, kind of funny, cuddly looking worms.
Yeah, it's kind of it's almost a little cartoonish, this art. Like
it is, yeah.
It's to me, honestly, what it evokes is it seems like something from Princess Mononoke or something, doesn't it? Like the kind of classic Miyazaki thing of nature rising up against a corrupting civilization.
Yeah, or they're like the Ohms from
it's the Ohms. You're right.
They're baby Ohms.
Yeah, the art here is by Chippy, who's an artist who I don't hear much about. He's only done 126 pieces, but when I look at his art, honestly, it's basically all bangers. Like he plays with a lot of different styles, from cartoony to photorealistic. They're almost always interesting compositions, with maybe the sole exception of, I'm scrolling here, Flowstone Slide, which is kind of a compositional disaster. It's super bland. But anyway, Chippy's done a lot of great art. Go look up his Scryfall. From Abyssal Persecutor to the second Achroma art to Chancellor of the Forge, Bloom Tender. Just lots of really cool art in here. Dance of Shadows, which we both had strong reactions to.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, the art's great here, but the card, I think we can say goodbye to.
Yeah, I don't think the card gets there for me. I'm fine just insta-cutting it.
All right. This is a big one. This is going to be a big moment kind of emotionally for us, for the show. So buckle up. We've got Feral Deceiver, 3G for a 3/2 spirit. You can pay 1 colorless to look at the top card of your library, and you can pay 2 colorless to reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, Feral Deceiver gets +2/+2 and gains trample until end of turn. You can only do this once per turn. So this is the last card in I think we can safely say our least favorite cycle in Kamigawa, the Deceivers, who all have this ability of revealing or looking at a card on top of your library and then revealing that, and if it's a land, you get some benefit. I'll almost miss them. And I think this one has kind of deceived me.
I know, this is what I hate about them, is they are almost good enough, or actually maybe good enough. They're just so, they're so unfun and bland from a play perspective.
So I think Feral Deceiver may actually be good enough, just barely good enough. I know.
That's why it makes me hate it all the more, Connor.
It does, but he can become a 5/4 trampler, which is, on the level of Gut Wrencher Oni.
Yeah, 5/4 Trampler is very real. It's a very real rate.
Like serious business in this block. So I guess we have a choice here. It sounds like we agree that this may be an actual card, like that could be good sometimes.
Yes. We had this problem with what was it? The red Deceiver too was
the harsh Deceiver.
No,
Was
that's
it
the white
harsh or
one.
cruel?
I don't know.
No, cruel's the black one.
No, brutal Deceiver.
Brutal Deceiver. But I that was first strike, right? This is trample. Like this could actually end a game,
which is very good too. Yeah, this could swing in as a 5/4 Trampler. That's that's a very significant threat. I don't know. Do we want to have this be the only Deceiver? I feel like I've used this as leverage against you every time because the white Deceiver is the worst. And so we came out swinging and said the Deceivers are terrible. The white Deceiver, most of all, is abysmal. Let's cut it. And then each Deceiver since then, I've used that as the thin end of the wedge to say Deceivers are terrible. We can't possibly let this one in.
And this is our last shot.
Now we come at last to the green one. And part of me wants to just deny them the chance to get in at all to the cube because I don't like the way they play and I think they're boring and dumb. But if you want this one, I don't think it's indefensible. And I also think we could potentially go back and throw in one of the red one or something too. Because, they are an iconic. I don't know if they're iconic. That's the wrong word. They are a part of the block that, based on Reddit, at least 2 other people besides us remember.
They are something.
So, I mean, let's try to ignore. Let's pretend this isn't called Feral Deceiver. I'm going to call it Feral Spirit Puncher. Punchy Spirit. Feral Punchy Spirit.
Feral Punchy Spirit. So I feel better about it already.
Yeah, you do, right? So Feral Punchy Spirit is a 4-mana 3/2 where you can pay 3 mana and 40% of the time it becomes a 5/4 with trample. So how do you feel about that? 4 mana 5/3/2 they can become a 5/4 with trample 40% of the time for 3 mana.
I mean, I don't feel great, but I don't feel terrible. And I guess he is at the 4 mana slot too, which is a little bit tricky. But I feel like, I don't know, with every one of these Deceivers we've said, is this one, like the white one sucked, but maybe this one it does enough? And I feel like we finally arrived at a Deceiver. Our last chance, we've arrived at one where it's like, yeah, maybe this does do enough. I feel like we need to try it, just to have one in for, even if it's just the first cut of the cube.
Hold on. Let me just read you the other 4 mana 4 drops. Or 4 drop green creatures. Not the whole thing. I'm just going to read you the names of some of the good ones. Okay. Burr Grafter.
Yep.
Iwamori of the Open Fist.
Mm-hmm.
Kashi-Tribe Reaver.
Mm-hmm.
Kodama of the South Tree.
Mm-hmm.
Order of the Sacred Bell. Root Runner.
Mm-hmm.
Sachi, daughter of Shishiro. Shisato, Whispering Hunter. Sosuke, son of Sashiro. That's not even all of them. Those are just the decent ones. I feel like between those, we're going to have enough green 4 drops that we don't need this guy, honestly.
But don't you just want to have a little bit of Deceiver action in there?
I mean, no.
We've been talking about them for so long.
Fine, okay. Well, so how many? Is it just the green? Or are you going to go back and post-date them?
I want 2. I just want 2 Feral Deceivers.
Connor, the cube's only going to have 700 cards. Are you going to tell me that 1 out of every 350 cards is going to be Feral Deceivers?
It doesn't seem like that much to ask.
It seems like a lot.
Okay. Since you are dead set on getting rid of all the Deceivers, so I will go down to 1 Feral Deceiver here at meh.
But there's a but. I can sense it.
No, that's it. Just 1 Feral Deceiver. That's all I ask.
Fine. Let's throw it in.
All right. I might ask for a favor later.
But you're going to have to answer to all the fans who draft the cube and expect the full Deceiver cycle based on seeing Feral Deceiver and go, no, where are the harsh and brutal and the other Devour, whatever the other 2 are called.
I think the comments are going to be more along the lines of why are any of these in here?
Yeah, why is this card here? Okay, Met 1X is fine.
Yep.
Also pretty decent art.
Yeah, I think this is definitely my favorite Deceiver art. Most of the other ones have like actual human faces floating around as their little spirit buddies. This one has these kind of demon mask things they look a lot cooler and less creepy by being less human.
Yeah, and I like that the form of the spirit itself is obscured by the masks and the green smoke, which kind of fits the Deceiver. All the other Deceivers, you can see clearly what the Deceiver looks like, but here he's kind of obscured. So like, what is his actual nature, which fits well with the effect in the name.
Right.
All right, Feral Deceiver. Best of the Deceivers. You heard it here first. And last. No one else is ever going to talk about these cards except us.
Nope.
Okay, let's go to Gale Force. 4 and a G for a sorcery. Gale Force deals 5 damage to each creature with flying. So this is your kind of classic green hates flying, let's kill some flyers card. It kills pretty much all the flyers in the block. It is super expensive at 5 mana. Surprisingly, green only gets 2 cards in the block that deal damage to flyers. Technically, there's 3, but one of them just pings, so I'm not going to count it. So there's this, and then there's Arashi the Sky Asunder in Saviors. So Arashi the Sky Asunder is a far better card, A, because it has a way better name. It's a super cool name. But B, because it basically does this, but also can be a 4/4, which, is pretty clearly better. That said, I think this card still has a home. So we're only going to run one Arashi in the cube. And apart from Arashi and this, there is no way for green to deal with the dragons. Those legendary 5/5 dragons that are so iconic and so game-breaking. There's only 3 or maybe 4, depending on how you want to count it, green creatures with reach in the entire block. The largest of them is a 3/4, which is not enough to take down a 5/5 dragon. There is technically Traproot Kami and Betrayers, who's a 0x, so he could block them forever, but who cares? So this and Arashi are literally the only ways green could kill a dragon, basically in the whole block. And I think that might be enough to get it a meh.
Okay, I just have to say right out the gate, I've always hated this particular theme in green.
This whole part of green's color pie?
I just don't like this deal damage only to flyers thing.
Why?
I don't have a really rational reason for it. But
what about Hurricane? How do you feel about Hurricane?
I mean, okay, I was thinking about this in comparison to Hurricane, and this is so much worse because Hurricane at least deals damage to players, right? Like you can use it to close things out. This, if there are no flyers, this literally does nothing, and it costs 5 mana.
Plus, Hurricane's better because it got printed with a blue border by accident in Summer Magic.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's some good trivia.
It's like the rarest misprint in the game. We'll put a link in the show notes.
Wow. Maybe we should make a version of Gale Force that has a blue border.
Get a custom
customize it.
Only people to ever do a custom. We should commission Klug altars to do an altar of Gale Force. It's just with blue border.
The only people that have ever asked anything related to this card.
That's right. Sorry, keep going.
Oh,
That's
that Hurricane's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that cool?
Yeah. And there's just, red kind of has the opposite of this, right? Dealing damage to non-flyers. And that's so much more relevant because most creatures don't have flying. Most of the cards in green, at least the ones that come to mind right now, that kind of hate flyers as a group, right? They're like Gale Force, Hurricane, Arashi, where it's sort of knocking everything out of the sky, which is sort of a cool idea. But what that means is that most of them end up being pretty expensive, like Gale Force being 5 mana. You can't just target a flyer and knock it down with some 2 mana spell. Like, you have to save up for a Gale Force to deal with 1 dragon.
Yeah, it's true. The more classic version of this in green is more like 2 damage, deal 6, or 2 mana, deal 6 damage to a flyer, which I think is more relevant, as you're saying, because a lot of times you don't really need to sweep the board of flyers. That's a nice bonus. You more just need to deal with 1 pesky permanent that you can't answer.
There's 1 dragon or 1 angel or something that you're wanting to get rid of.
Can I say, set against that, this card is played in only 90 cubes on Cube Cobra. So if we include this, we could be thought leaders, Connor.
That's a really interesting way to look at the fact that this is only in 90 cubes.
Yeah, I just, put a more growth mindset spin on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Something I hate about this card is that the creature, I've been looking at the art a lot since I rated it. I keep going back to see if I'm missing something, but the creature that's falling doesn't appear to have wings or look like it ever flew. That is confusing and irritating to me.
Yeah, he's just sort of falling out of the sky.
Yeah, it's like there was a crossed wires where, they thought it was like a Gale Force wind that damages all creatures instead of just flyers. But this guy seems clearly land bound.
Well, let me give you something else to hate about this card, which is
there's plenty.
The fact that it's not arcane.
Yeah, can you read the flavor text?
Everything the Kami had done, they did with more force. Gentle breezes became typhoons, rolling rivers turned to crushing rapids, and gentle growth became overnight masses of thorns and vines. So the flavor text is describing how, everything about nature has become more violent since this war with the spirits started. Which obviously makes you think that Gale Force is supposed to be the Kami creating this wind. But it's not arcane. Like, why couldn't they just add arcane to this so you at least had a splice option or a spirit craft trigger off of it?
I agree. It's a total flavor fail, and it's a weird one. My suspicion is they did it because they thought They also gave this a somewhat generic name, and maybe they thought this had become like a core set staple, and it just proved too terrible to ever reprint.
Yeah, you might be onto something there.
Kind of interesting for 5 mana. I almost feel like this could have just dealt, say, 8 damage to each creature with flying or something. Just like guaranteed kill all flyers for 5 seems pretty reasonable.
Yeah, the fact that it's 5 damage makes me think it was sort of in there for the specific reason that you were calling out.
The dragons.
The dragons.
It feels like that. Yeah, it feels like a way for. Honestly, it feels like it's maybe stuck in so that limited decks and Champions Limited would have some way of dealing with the flyers. It's not a great way, but it would at least be like, I've got something I can pull out of my sideboard, because this is clearly going 15th pick every time.
But maybe you are onto something that green. I hadn't done all this math on what answers green actually has to the dragons. So if it's literally just this and Arashi, maybe green does need this.
I'll see. You've turned me against it.
Oh, now you want to insta-cut it like I did.
Yeah, I do, because it's like, well, maybe green's answer to this is just like beating down with Kodama of the North Tree,
Yeah, just winning.
Like, does green have to be able to answer flyers? I'm not sure it does.
I don't think so.
Huh. A little piece of truly useless trivia. This is the 7th cheapest uncommon in the set in foil. So there you go.
You're not going to get intel like this anywhere else.
No. I wish I'd thought of looking that up earlier. The cheapest foil in the set is Kumano's Pupils, which we hated, which totally checks out because that card is even more bland and forgettable than this card.
But that comes with the coconut bras.
That's right, which is kind of funny. Also cheaper than this card in foil, if you want to pick some up, listeners, are Sideswipe, the 2-mana red spell that redirects arcane spells, and Hanabi Blast, the horrible red 3-mana return it to your hand, discard a card at random thing.
Yeah, that kind of vindicates our reviews of all of those cards.
Yeah, maybe we should just start doing our decisions based on what's cheapest. Just cut all the cheap foils, just assume they're bad.
Maybe
that might not end well for cards I love, like Candle's Glow. Let's just cut this thing.
Yeah, get it out. Our next card is kind of a big one. Well, it's a small one in terms of cost, but kind of a big one in terms of impact. Glimpse of Nature. G for a sorcery. Whenever you play a creature spell this turn, draw a card. Actually, do you want to kick off the discussion of this? There's a lot of sort of history behind this card that I think you know more about.
Yeah, I won't pretend to be an expert, but this card has a pretty fascinating history. So this card is banned in Modern, and it was actually banned in Modern before the format officially started. So when Wizards first announced Modern, the community was so excited about it that they organized an informal community cup on Magic Online, and Wizards looked at the results, and this seems kind of unscientific, to be honest, looked at the results and then banned like 12 cards based on the result. And some of them were cards I think they were sure they were going to ban going into the format. Cards like Stoneforge Mystic and Jace, that at the time Modern was announced back in 2010, were extremely degenerate and powerful, were sort of generally hated for their impact on standard. And so I think Wizards killed it because killed them right out of the gate, because they said, well, players are going to already hate these cards. The last thing we want to do is have our new format be defined by these cards people already hate. Glimpse of Nature was banned because it outperformed, delivering pretty consistent turn 3 wins in a style of deck that now is often called Elf Ball, which is to say playing a ton of cheap green creatures, many of which the cantrip, and just going off with tons of mana acceleration and just vomiting your entire hand on like turn 2 or turn 3. And so Glimpse of Nature has been banned in Modern since the format's inception 12 years ago. And I think it's interesting to wonder, like, could it be unbanned now? Could it not? I'm not a Modern expert, but it's interesting that this has never gotten a shot to prove whether it's broken or not. And I have a suspicion that that is part of the reason this card's never gotten reprinted, despite having what seems to me like a really iconic, powerful kind of effect, really unique effect in the history of the game. It seems like something that would have gotten shoved into some reprint set or standard set at some point, but it never has. And I suspect the reason is because it's banned in Modern, so it would be a funny thing to reprint.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those cards, though, just looking at it, where you think of like, why hasn't this shown up? It's not arcane. It doesn't have any of the sort of hallmarks of a Kamigawa card that you would think would just take it out of the running.
Oh, and I'll put a link to the Ancient Wizards article where they talk about this banning in the show notes.
So what do you think about this in our cube? I don't think it's much.
I don't think so either. I questioned myself on it. It actually helped to go look this up on Cube Cobra and realize, strangely, this is not very much played. It's only played in, I can't remember, like 500 cubes or something. Even though it seems like something that would go into like a vintage cube or a legacy cube or some combo heavy thing. But I think it's just too hard to set up in any format, but let alone our format where like most of your creatures are like 3 drops and 4 drops. Like I feel like a lot of the time this basically cantrips. Very occasionally it'll draw you 2.
I think it's mostly just a cantrip without any other effect on it. It's just the drawing a card part. So it's an insta-cut for me. I don't think this is going to turn into one, or maybe like it. You know, you might get 1 or 2 cards out of it if you're lucky, but it's mostly just going to be something you would rather have anything else in place of.
The point at which it gets gross, right, is like when you say get 3 cards out of it. Then it's Ancestral Recall. But like that's really hard to do. Like creatures are pretty expensive in this format, the decent ones anyway. So like, I don't know, if you assume your average creature costs 3-ish mana, you would need to have 10 mana up to Glimpse of Nature, and presumably you would have been like holding back those creatures in order to make this work. So there's an opportunity cost to be paid. And of course, there's a flip side, non-ancestral version of this where you draw it in the late game, like as a top deck, and like it literally does nothing. It's the worst thing you could draw.
And then you just concede.
Yeah, because you put Glimpse of Nature in your deck. And I don't think we're alone in this. Like, it's not just that it's underplayed on Cube Cobra. I went like digging around on Reddit, the MTG Cube subreddit, to see if I could find any discussion of this, and there just really isn't. Like, this card has never gotten very much attention from Cube designers, and despite its 18 years availability.
I will say I do like the art quite a bit on this card. It's very
great,
very unusual. It's it looks like a kind of a really old painting of it. Shows Dosan sitting on a rock, and he's just kind of watching these 2 deer out in the meadow, and it looks like there's maybe a mountain out in the distance, but the whole thing looks very faded and weathered and aged, and I don't feel like I see that on almost any other card.
Yeah, it's true. It's a very kind of watercolory look, isn't it?
Yeah, and like an old watercolor.
Yeah, and it's interesting, as you say, to see his style flex like this. Really cool piece.
Yeah, this is by Shishizaru, who also did Floating Dream Zubera, quite a few other pieces, I think, up until Ravnica. But this one kind of stands alone, style-wise.
Yeah, I really like the art, and I really like the card. I don't see it having a home here, sadly.
Yeah, insta-cut.
Yeah, I think so. That one hurts. All right, let's go to Hana Kami. Hana Kami is G for a 1/1 creature spirit. And it says 1 and a G, sack it, return target arcane card from your graveyard to your hand. I've always had a huge soft spot for this card. I think the main reason is the art. It's got this fantastic Rebecca Guay art of a bunch of, I guess you'd call them sunflowers, like kind of pink yellow sunflowers with human faces vomiting up more flowers. Mm-hmm. And it's such a great balance of like the color scheme and kind of basic theme of it, like scream cute. It's got a real kind of cutesy color, but then like when you look at it, it's pretty horrifying. And it's such a perfect fit for Rebecca Guay's style. I really, really think this is a strong piece.
And I think it fits perfectly into like Kamigawa's style too, right? Like you said, there's this lovely flower, and then it doesn't take you long to realize that the center of it is this distended, like almost like screaming human face with flowers just being vomited out. And the flavor text too, which says, "It grew in lands lit by pride and watered by tears." I feel like both of those together just really kind of capture this sense of Kamigawa being this place of really deep melancholy. Yeah. And this plane that's, been torn apart by this war and by like suffering on all sides. You get this really sad story kind of juxtaposed on this card that is the god of flowers.
Yeah, it's like the beauty of the god of flowers has been distorted and ruined.
Right.
The card itself, I think it's just okay. I think the main thing it appears to have going for it is it's one of the very, very few 1-drop spirits that's at all okay. And so therefore it's like, oh, this is the cheapest Soul Chef target. And you could start building the scenario in your mind of like, I sack this to get an arcane spell back, and then I soul shift this, and then I sack it again, and I'm getting this crazy value chain going, and da-da-da-da-da. And I think that's somewhat true. I think the biggest challenge with that is it's actually not as good a soul shift target as it appears, because there's only one soul shifter with soul shift 1 in the block. And that thing is terrible. It's Death Knell Kami from Saviors. It's a terrible card. So really this is competing for cards again as a soul shift 2 target. And that is a little bit of a stronger picture. That's the Zubera, some other decent cards. So I think Hana Kami, like, I'm not sure it quite gets there on value because the body itself is like a 1/1. Like, the more I play this format, the more I'm like, this is not a format for 1-mana 1/1s to matter.
Yeah. I was actually curious about how many green arcane cards there are that you'd actually want to get. And green only has 13 arcane cards in the whole block, which is a little bit less than half of what red and blue have. White has somewhere between 13 and 25. Can't remember exactly where. Black is like 20, 25, something like that. But green really is lacking arcane spells compared to the other colors.
Yeah, it feels like the real scenario where you're doing this is with black, right? Like to get back a rend flesh or a pull under, like I think that's where you're happiest with Hana Kami.
For me, this makes me sad because the art and the flavor is so great, but it's just really hard for me to see this 1-mana 1/1 that sometimes gets you an arcane card back. It's just hard for me to see it being all that relevant.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's also pretty hard for me to see this thing mattering.
Mm.
I had it at a meh 2x despite my skepticism because I feel like, well, because I think it might surprise me. Like, I think the ability to recur and regrowth and buy things back is meaningful, particularly when you could start putting it together as part of a soul shift value chain. And I mean, come on, that art. I mean, we generally haven't kept things in because of the art, but there's a case for it, right? Maybe.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, like, I'm never going to be sad when I see this popping up in the draft. Maybe I'm a little sad if it has to go in my deck. But if I see it coming up in a pack, then I go, I like that card. I'm not sure I want it, but I like seeing it.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Spirit Craft. It's funny because I feel like this thing is most at home outside of green. Like, I feel like green's heart in this set is like powering out its pretty solid mid-range 4, 5, and 6 drop threats. You know, things like, you know, the Kodamas or Moss Kami and stuff. Like, that's where green really excels, is just getting out these beefy beaters that are hard to deal with. And it also excels at kind of soul shift. It excels at this grindy value game. It doesn't do much with spells, which is appropriate for green. And it doesn't do that much with Spirit Craft triggers either compared to the other colors. And that's where this thing is best, right? Obviously getting arcane spells back is part of it, but also the Spirit Craft trigger thing of like, I don't know, if this gets an arcane spell back, that's 2 or 3 Spirit Craft triggers out of it. That's pretty solid value. I had it at a meh 2x. What about a meh 1x? Just like one of them in and see if it fits in somewhere.
Yeah, okay. Let's try it out.
All right. I didn't look up the foil price of this, but I suspect it's a little higher from the Rebecca Guay equity and the amazing art.
Yeah, this would be a cool foil.
It's going to set you back a whole $1.40, Connor.
Ooh.
Yep.
Going to have to save up for that. Let's move on to Heartbeat of Spring. And I'll warn you specifically, Austin, that this one is a bit of a reading test. So be aware.
I've read this card.
Heartbeat of Spring.
I've read it.
2G. Enchantment. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, that player adds 1 mana of that type to his or her mana pool. So the important thing here is that this applies to both players.
I know.
So I know now. Everybody knows
in
now.
This case.
I don't think what would this do in the cube?
In our cube, I think basically nothing. You know, it's a little bit of it's not quite an all-star, but it's a solid cube role player. Like, this is, I think, basically always been in the MTGO vintage cube as a another copy of Mana Flare. This is actually color shifted Mana Flare, the original Mana Flare from Alpha, which was a red, exactly this card in red. Makes a lot more sense in green, obviously. But those cards are used in like High Tide, Turnabout, Storm, like value crazy decks that just do not exist in this format. There's just no place in original Kamigawa block, or probably modern. But anyway, there's no place in this set to take advantage of this card. And so I think basically what happens is you play this, your opponent untaps, your opponent goes off, and then you hope to claw your way back in the game. Like, I just I don't think this has any place in our cube, sadly.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's a really important point at the end there. Like, your opponent probably gets the first benefit from this, right? Unless you already have a ton of mana out and you have something to use it for, you play this, and then your opponent gets the first turn of a bunch of mana. So Instacut?
Yeah, I think it probably is an Instacut, despite being an iconic card and having, really pretty art. But I just don't see how this would ever fit in and do anything meaningful in our cube.
Oh, actually, there's one comment on Gatherer that I saw that I thought was kind of cute, and I wanted to read it. Someone said, with this, Llanowar, Land Searchers, and the Mana Snakes, you could get insane amounts of mana very quickly. hands down, green rules mana acceleration. And I just thought that that was a nice little comment about what green does.
I loved the kind of naivete sounds condescending, and I don't really mean it that way. I love the way the Gatherer, harkens back to an era where not everyone understood Magic that well, us included,
Right.
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what would go through my mind.
Yeah, they were like clawing their way into understanding the game and, learning together, and no one was that good. It wasn't like today where Arena and Moto mean there's millions of Magic matches being played every week and everyone has a really sharp understanding of the format. There's a lot more kind of, what? Green can make a lot of mana. What can I do with that?
Yeah.
And even on the casual side today, right? Like casual today is defined by Commander, which is hugely defined by EDH Rec, right? It's optimized and it's like sharpened and it's synergized and it's homogenized to a large extent. And I do miss, I don't know if you could even recreate today that feeling, no matter how you engineer it,
Right.
because the amount of data and communication we have access to just means like it's just always, and Magic is such a big game. Like I think you'd have to go to an obscure game with less players to recreate fully that feeling of I don't know what's good.
Mm-hmm. And I don't really know what these colors or these cards do exactly. And figuring it out, and it's exciting to figure it out.
Yeah, that's awesome. An awesome Instacut.
Lovely.
Next up, we have the last Honden, Honden of Life's Web. 4 and a G for a legendary enchantment, Shrine. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 colorless spirit token for each shrine you control. So we've had the whole Honden cycle. I love the Honden cycle. For me, this is probably the second most meh after the black one. It's just too expensive. Like at 5 mana, realistically, even with some acceleration, you might miss a land drop. On average, this is coming down, let's say turn 5 or 6. So on turn 6 or 7, you make your first 1/1. And then the turn after that, you make another 1/1. And it's like, even after 4 turns after you cast it, you made 4 1/1s. Like this is just so glacially slow. And while we keep talking about how grindy this format is, it's grindy, but it's not, in my experience, settled by an army of 1/1s swarming over your opponent. It's settled by like bomby threats like the dragons or the Kodamas. It's settled by giant spells like Devouring Greed or Strength of Cedars. It's settled by evasion effects, like what was that that black 2-drop with fear?
Oh, Nezumi Cutthroat, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one, the Cutthroat. Like this doesn't do any of those things, and so I just don't feel like you're ever in a good position to capitalize on what, on the Honden of Life's Web.
It is interesting that you mentioned Devouring Greed, though, because that has some obvious synergy with Honden of Life's Web. 5 is a very expensive starting point for what this effect is. But if you do have something like Devouring Greed in the wings, or if you just have another decent Honden or two, if you have the red Honden or the blue one out, and then you bring out the Honden of Life's Web, if you can manage to get just 2 of them, I think that this can really snowball into something that your opponent doesn't have an answer to. If you're getting 2 damage off of the red Honden, or if you're drawing 2 cards a turn off the blue one, and you're also getting 2 1/1 spirits that are kind of keeping you in the game until you get, whatever you're looking for to close things out, I think there could be some serious value.
Yeah, and ironically, with that, or with this being kind of meh, green, if we are going to have that 5-color Honden deck that you're talking about here, it's almost going to have green, because that's where all of the fixing outside of land is located in the block.
Yeah.
So at that point, maybe we're just priced into having this Honden anyway, because it's like if you're doing the 5-color Honden thing, you're going to be in green, so you might as well have your green Honden.
I want to say, before we settle on a rating for this, we have not been giving the Honden a very hard time about their flavor text.
I hate their flavor text.
All of them have extremely stupid flavor text. So I'd like to just read this one. But since we're on our last Honden, I'd like to just read it out, and we can
read all 5 of them out.
Read all of them?
Yeah, well, they're only a sentence each. Just read all the 5 Honden flavor texts, and then
let me pull them all up on one page here so I can.
Okay, and then we'll talk about this one specifically, but also just in general how not good they are.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll just go through.
Let's go in Warburg.
All right. Honden of Cleansing Fire says, "To the sorrow of all, its fire was turned toward those who worshipped it." Honden of Seeing Winds in blue says, "To the sorrow of all, its winds found sin in the hearts of those who once learned from its wisdom." Honden of Night's Reach says, "To the sorrow of all, Its dark reach grasped and crushed those who guarded its silent vigil. Honden of Infinite Rage says, to the sorrow of all, its rage became focused on those who once stoked it. And you can probably guess how Honden of Life's Web's flavor text starts. To the sorrow of all, its web became a net that strangled those who helped weave it. What does any of that mean? Why? What is this sorrow coming from?
It's super heavy-handed. It's like, you know that old writing aphorism that you should show rather than tell? These fail that hard, right? They just tell. They say, to the sorrow of all, not clear why. And then they say something abstract that's kind of hard to understand. Like, what does that even mean? That its web became a net that strangled those who helped. Like, I don't know what that means.
Right.
And then all of them, except for red. Red, I think, is a little better because it deals damage, and its flavor text says, its rage became focused on those who once stoked it. Well, that makes sense. There's a fire that was stoked, and then the fire turned on the mortals who stoked it. That kind of makes sense. But all the other ones have varying degrees of abstraction or just complete disconnect. Like the worst is white, you know, where it's like its fire was turned towards those who worshipped it. And as a reminder, because it's been 12 hours since we talked about that card, it says that card just gains life. You know, so its fire was turned on those who worshipped it in order to help you gain life. Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, or the blue one, its winds found sin in the hearts of those who once learned from...
What does that mean? Blue doesn't even care about sin. Blue doesn't care about sin. It's the color of knowledge and abstraction and amorality.
I know. What does that mean? Since when did the Kami care about sin?
That's true. They're just natural forces.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point about, you know, showing versus telling. Like this line about to the sorrow of all, it's kind of the opposite of Hana Kami in a way, where you look at the art, you read the flavor text, and you're sort of forming this sense in your mind of like the kind of atmosphere that exists on this plane. And these are just, the Honden are just like really trying to force upon you, oh, you should feel sad about what's happening here. You should like feel bad about the Kami being mad at the mortals now.
It's good to contrast it with so many of the other better flavor texts. Like, I'll just read two, which I think both evoke, Hana Kami's one you mentioned, but other ones also evoke that feeling of sadness and loss and anxiety without like hitting you over the head with it by saying to the sorrow of all. So Feast of Worms, for example, says, the dust beneath our feet was once part of a mighty civilization. Shall we too provide the path for a future generation? Sensei Golden Tail. Now, maybe because I'm very sleepy, but I actually got a slight chill reading that because it's evocative, it's emotional, it connects back to the effect of the card. It doesn't hit you over the head with it. It just makes you think, oh wow, like things are truly dire.
Yeah,
and previous efforts to save things have fallen apart. We might not succeed. You know, all these emotions that just are not present in these Honden flavor texts.
Right. Well, thank you for humoring me with this.
Thank you for bringing it up.
I've been bothered by all of these flavor texts from the very beginning. I think we gave the Honden of Cleansing Fire a hard time specifically, but you know, before we close out our Honden cycle, we just needed to go through that.
You know, and it hurts most because they're one of my favorite cycles. Like, I really like these cards.
Yeah, it's a great cycle. Like, really cool stuff going on here. Really cool card design.
So I have this in a meh. I think that's wrong. I think you put it a build around, which is clearly correct for all of these Hondens.
Yeah, that's sort of our default rating for all the Honden, I think.
What about quantity? I had it at a 1x just because I'm so deeply unimpressed with the ability.
I put it at 2x because that's what we've been saying, either 2 or 3 on all the other ones, but I think
we're too generous.
I think that is going to be too much Honden, so I'm sure we're going to have to dial it back. Maybe we do start dialing it back now and just have one of these. It does cost 5 mana.
I think we should take this one back to 1, and then we really need to take a look at where we landed on the others, because I think we keep realizing like there's 600 cards in this block. We can't have that many things at 2x or 3x.
Right.
If we're not going to have a 1400 card cube.
Okay, let's call it a build around 1x. Okay, next up we've got Humble Budoka. 1G for a 2/2 human monk with Shroud. So it's a bear with Shroud. Other than the rippling muscles on this guy, there really isn't that much to get excited about here. He sure is. Like, if look up the art for this Humble Budoka, this guy is ripped. Like, he is literally flexing. So I question his humility.
This is a competitive category in Magic, but I think he might be the most muscular guy in Magic.
Whoa. I'm sure there's some counter examples.
Most muscular human in Magic. How about that?
Okay, yeah, maybe.
Okay, so who else, Connor, is muscular? Kamal is pretty muscular, but I don't think
Yeah,
Kamal is
not
more
like this.
beefy than this guy. Let me go look.
I think it's the size of his head in relation to the
Yes.
rest of his body that makes him look so strong.
Yeah, so Kamal, I would describe Kamal's basic proportions as like World of Warcraft character proportions, which is to say
Yep.
his bicep is the size of his head. But
Mhm.
this guy somehow like takes that and doubles that. Like he's gigantic.
Each of his shoulders is twice the size of his head.
What's the story here? Is he meant to be a kind of Fezzik figure, like a giant who's found a peaceful way of life or something,
Maybe
but who still lifts a lot?
I kind of get the sense that he's still got to live.
Yeah.
I get the sense kind of from these, it looks like tattoos or something on his arms. And then the flavor text says, each time wanderers entered the forest seeking enlightenment, Dosan was there waiting for them to arrive. It gives the impression that maybe he was like a mercenary or a Ronin or something.
Yeah.
Some strong warrior who, turned
Very
to
strong.
a very strong warrior, Tutu, who turned to a path of humility.
It's interesting to reflect that Dosan has the same stat line. So despite this guy being, I don't know if this is meant to be Dosan in the art, but let's assume this guy is a Dosan-sized monk, fellow monk.
That seems reasonable.
This guy's about 4x the size of Dosan.
So it's not all about muscles.
That's really not. So someone on Reddit said Shroud is a drawback, which really helped me in my evaluation of this card. And I think it's true. Your opponent is not going to bother pointing removal at this thing anyway. And so, like, the spells that are going to want to target this are like Kodama's Might to help it trade up, or Strength of Cedars to, help you get in for the surprise win when he goes unblocked. So, like, I actually think, the 2-2 with Shroud is basically like, he's like a worse grizzly bear, and that's not a great place to be.
Oof.
And green has a lot of options at 2. Like, I don't know. Well, just this episode, right? We've talked about Budoka Gardener and Dripping Tongue Zubera. I mean, I'm absolutely more excited about those cards than this. And later in this set, we have a bunch of cards, but Sakura Tribe Elder, for example, like, I don't know. I don't know if there's a spot for this guy.
I think that if he was a spirit or even a snake,
yes,
which we haven't seen yet.
Why? He should be a snake, actually. Why isn't he a snake?
There's a decent amount of snake synergy in this block. And if he was one of those types that had synergy with anything, which human and monk do not, then, maybe he could be a thing. But right now he just is a 2-2 with, I think that's a really good point, basically a drawback.
Now you said that, I resent him even more because there's a ton of snake tribal in this set, but all of the snakes are like 4-drops, or many of them. Right. And the cheaper ones are kind of bad. And if this was just like a stupid 2-2 for 2 that just happened to be a snake, I actually think that it would get a lot better.
Just a big swole snake.
It's just, and then they could have called it Swole Snake instead of Humble Budoka.
I think Swole Snake might cause some trouble.
Oh God! Oh no! That is definitely going to be my new Call of Duty username.
Maybe
Call
that's why
it.
he's not
No one
snake.
take it.
You better lock that down right after this.
Okay. Yeah. So I agree. I think we should just cut this, not because I think it's unplayable, but because I just don't think it really adds anything to the environment. And I think we have a lot more interesting options to play with it too.
Let's just cut him.
Insta cut. Okay, and next up we have Iname Life Aspect. 4 GG for a 4/4 legendary creature spirit. When Iname Life Aspect dies, you may exile it. If you do, return any number of target spirit cards from your graveyard to your hand. So this, of course, is the companion to Iname Death Aspect, and then later Iname is one of the few multicolored cards in the set. It's a huge splashy ability, at least on the surface, right? You can return any number. Like, any number is always an exciting phrase to see on any card. That said, I'm not super sold on Iname, largely because the Spirit Tribe already benefits from a ton of recursion. And so my worry is, based on just a teeny bit of playtesting, but mostly theory crafting, that a lot of times Iname isn't going to have that much work to do because you'll have been soul shifting the whole time.
I think I feel a little better about him than you do. There's plenty of spirits in green, and today we're only going to see one of them that actually has soul shift. And I know that that's not going to hold all the way through all the green cards of the entire block, but even just as I'm scrolling through the rest of the green cards in Champions, there's just not all that much soul shift, so I'm not sure there's as much recursion as you're talking about.
Yeah, let me go fact check myself on that. So there are 27 cards in the whole block with soul shift. 5, 7, 9, 14 of them are in green. So it's definitely the heaviest soul shift color.
Okay. Yeah.
Some of them are terrible, like Harbinger of Spring, but a lot of them are pretty solid, like Burr Grafter or Forked Branch Garami, Night Soil Kami.
Iname has the benefit of being able to get multiple things back regardless of their cost, because Soul Shift is specifically tied to a certain mana cost. Like you need to have a big enough Soul Shift to get back something like Moss Kami, and there are very few things that have a Soul Shift that big. But Iname can just grab any number of spirits regardless of their cost, which I think is pretty good. I mean, I don't think I would draft Iname unless I was already in a deck with a lot of spirits, especially expensive ones. But I'd be, I think, pretty happy to have him if I did.
Would you be that happy though with a 6 mana 4/4 that only does something when it dies, and even then you then have to invest more mana to get the value?
I mean, I think I might kind of be happy with the 6 mana 4/4. We felt pretty good about Earthshaker, and that was just a 6 mana 4/5.
Yeah, but it was shaking the earth with every cast of a spirit or arcane spell.
Iname's bringing back every spirit that's died.
I wish it wasn't just every spirit. If it was every creature, that would be interesting.
That'd be pretty nice.
I think today it would be every creature. Not that that matters.
Yeah, if this was like a more modern Golgari card or something, which it looks like. It looks like a
strong Golgari vibes. Yeah, I like the way this is a green, so the other Iname is black. I like the way this one is a green card that looks green-black. I think that's nice.
Yeah, they tie together pretty well.
It has the problem both Inames do, that clearly Iname is flying or about to fly in the art, even though it doesn't have flying.
Yeah, but speaking of the black one, this is definitely better than the death aspect.
So you want to remind our listeners what the death aspect does?
Yeah, so Iname Death Aspect has this kind of cool like mirror effect of the Life Aspect. So Life Aspect, just a quick reminder, when it dies, you return any number of spirit cards. The Death Aspect, when it comes into play, you can search your deck for any number of spirit cards and put them into your graveyard. So Death Aspect comes into play and kind of sets up Life Aspect if you happen to have both of them and want to spend 12 mana on 8 worth of stats, then you can get this combo going.
Which is pretty cool.
So, I mean, he is better than that, and we gave the Death Aspect a meh. So I feel like Life Aspect sort of mathematically needs to be at least playable, according to my
What about going back and making them both build-arounds?
That's interesting. What are we building around, though? Aren't we going to have a lot of spirits no matter what?
Yeah, I think I'm responding that way because you're talking about kind of the pairing aspect of them, which to me says they kind of live and die together. I don't normally care that much about complete cycles, but I feel like having just one Iname is just strange. They need to both be there, and I feel like if they're not getting there, they probably both get cut together, so that starts to sound a little build-around-y to me.
Yeah, it's kind of a interesting point. I mean, they both are there for now, but I get what you're going for. And if we have Iname as one as well, then that's 24 mana worth of Iname.
Boy, that's a lot of slots dedicated to cards named Iname. It is funny how literal they were with the cycle aspect of both of these cost 6. They're both 4/4s, even though clearly Death Aspect at a minimum could have gotten better stats for its literally non-existent effect in a lot of scenarios. And then they also got literal with Iname as one costing 12. So it's literally the two Inames stapled together.
12 mana, 8/8. Yeah, it's both of them.
It's cute, but maybe too cute.
I kind of like that. Yeah, maybe a little too cute, but I kind of like a cycle like that where they're, you look at the dragons and they all have the same effect, but slightly different mana costs.
It does kind of offend the sense of symmetry, doesn't it?
It does a little bit. And Iname, like the two Inames are in every way like a perfect mirror of each other. Mana cost, stats, ability, even their art, they're basically mirroring each other with some slight differences.
All right, what about build around that? Or you want to settle at build around?
Yeah, let's do build around one copy. Okay, next up we have Joyous Respite. 3G for a sorcery arcane. You gain 1 life for each land you control. It's not a very exciting card, but I feel like maybe it's necessary to have in. At least it feels that way, mostly because it's arcane. Green just does not have that much arcane. Like I think I said a few cards ago, there are only 13 green arcane cards in the whole block. This is one of them. And this card might just be enough to kind of pull you back in a lot of games while you're waiting to draw. Probably not Iname, but some other some other creature that is gonna, pull you back from the brink.
Yeah, I think this is kind of your poster child for Med. Like if early on, which we probably should have done in the Impab episode, we talked about a couple examples of each rating. This seems like your kind of classic Mev. No one's going to get super excited to open Joyous Respite or to include it in the deck, and it does fill a role. I think it helps green bridge to the mid and late game where it's strongest. Tap on Reddit said it helps beat flyers, and I can see that. I don't know that it's super good tech. Like if your opponent's beating down with a dragon, this is probably only buying you a turn and a half. So it's more like a fog. It's like a 4-mana fog that scales slightly. It's one of the few life gain cards in the set that's even marginally playable. I struggle with the playability of life gain because I feel like learning to play Magic in the mid 2000s from reading on the web, basically every Magic strategy article for beginners, the main point that they all hammer home was like life gain is bad. Like, don't you feel like every daily MTG article for like 5 years basically talked about life gain not being good?
Yeah, and it took me a very long time to realize why that's true.
Yeah, and now I feel like I'm so biased against life gain, like I struggle to recognize it as ever being good. There's clearly some number where this is good. Like if this was 4 mana gain 20 life, I think everyone would agree that card is really solid. Maybe too good.
Even the fact that, with like a ridiculous number like 4 mana gain 20 life, you're still
I'm
saying
still thinking
like,
about it.
Maybe even too good. Like maybe it's too good. I think you're right that this is like the quintessential meh. There's just nothing to really be joyous about with this card other than the art, which is a very pretty Rebecca Guay piece.
I was going to give even that a meh because it has the Rebecca Guay style. It's really beautiful and painterly. But for me, the art itself is kind of like, it doesn't really have a focal point. It's kind of unimaginative compositionally. It's just like fountain in the center, flowers in the foreground, done. There's nothing Kamigawa about it. Like it's not bad. It's just kind of compared to a lot of Rebecca Guay's other pieces, which tend to have a little bit of weirdness to them or an unexpected element, like Hana Kami. Yeah, exactly. Or I don't know. For some reason, I'm blanking on Rebecca Guay art, but I think you know what I mean.
I still kind of like this, almost because it does look like it looks almost childish, but not in an off-putting way. Like the foreground is drawn very simply with these very bright kind of primary colors. There's a fountain of maybe water, I guess, in the back. So magical arcane water that's healing you.
This is another example of Wizards joked about this with Persecute Artists, but this is another example of like 85% of Rebecca Guay's art, especially not her non-recent art, went on just absolute dog cards. No one is ever going to play or remember. It's really tragic.
So is this an absolute dog?
No, I think it's a meh 1X. I think it'll have a place. I don't think I'd want more than one of them just because I don't think any deck would want more than one. I mean, maybe it would.
Right.
Maybe the Candles Glow deck is a Bant Candles Glow deck.
Whoa. I'm digging it.
I don't know. I feel like that's a stretch from a mana perspective, though.
Yeah.
And does that deck have any other reason to go into green? I think that's the main problem. Is like, as you're saying, if I look at the green arcane spells, basically you have this card. You have a couple of pump. You have Kodama's Reach. And then you've got a bunch of pump spells. And then a bunch of cards that we're going to cut, probably. It's pretty thin pickings in terms of variety. Like, there's nothing else that theoretical Candles Glow deck would want from green, I think, except this.
Yeah. I think you're right that this is a meh 1X, and a lot of times it probably is just going to maybe sit even in the sideboard, but like it is something you can splice Kodama's Might onto. Like that's worth something.
With 4 mana, they could have made this an instant, and nothing would have broken.
Wow, they really could have.
It's just so you could splice a Kodama's Might on it, at the time when you actually want a pump spell at instant speed. That would have been a nice little gift. All right, I'm fine with meh 1X.
All right, let's go with that.
All right, let's move on to our last Kamigawa dragon, Jugan, the Rising Star. 3 GGG for a legendary creature, Dragon Spirit. 5/5 flyer. When Jugan dies, you may distribute 5 +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures. So the general consensus, I think, is that this is the worst of the dragons, at least if you go by play rate. Cube Cobra, if I look at the stats, this is by far the least played dragon. Kukosho, the black one, appears in 2,150 cubes. Keiga, the blue one, appears in 1,581. Yosei in 1,187. Ryusei in 918, and Jugan in a measly 729. And a similar story for EDH Rec. Like Kukosho is in 17,000 decks, Ryusei in 7,000, Keiga in 5,000, Yosei in 3,600, and Jugan in just 1,700. So he's well off, 50% below the next worst. Okay, so all that out of the way, a bad dragon is still a dragon. A 5/5 flyer is still a 5/5 flyer for 6, especially in Kamigawa and especially in green. Like, this is the kind of body you just don't get in green, which I think is why we have this triple designated mana. And I think the effect is actually the second worst of the effects. I think it's better than Ryusei, the red one who basically wipes the board on death. Like, this is a pretty meaningful advantage to leave behind. He kind of replaces himself on death.
Yeah, and there's a lot more flexibility to Jugan than there is to Ryusei, obviously, because it's not killing everything. None of the other dragons have like a death trigger that you can use to selectively help your side of the board. The blue one, Keiga, targets an opponent's creature. The white one caps down opponent's creatures. But Jugan is kind of unique in being able to like enhance your own position on the board.
Yeah, I think the only real problem with Jugan is just that mana cost of 3 designated is going to be tough to cast. I think there will be a lot of times Jugan sits in your hand. He's certainly not going to reliably come down on 6 in any 2+ color deck. But I think I'd still be happy to have him in basically any green deck. I think he's an easy auto include.
I agree. And I mean, if you're going to have triple designated, like green is probably the best color to have it in, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yep, you got the fixing to hopefully help make this castable, which is good because we got at least one more triple designated green card coming up today.
Yep, coming soon. So auto include 1?
Yeah, I think so. Auto include 1. This also incidentally commands 10 decks on EDH Rec, which is not a lot, but I love that every commander, no matter how small, has somebody who's tried to make it into their commander.
Oh, that makes me sad. That's one of the lowest numbers we've had so far.
I think we're going to get even lower later today, but yeah, 10 is not a large number.
All right. I feel like I've gotten the short end of the stick on the cards that I'm reading on this episode.
You really have. We keep trading cool cards and lame cards.
So I really hope in Green Part 2 that I can make up for it with something, because this next card is Jukai Messenger. G for a 1/1 human monk with Forest Walk. There's just nothing to love here. It's just a 1/1 for 1 with no relevant creature types, with an ability that annoys me and is probably meaningless most of the time. Even if you have Forest Walk like up and working, like he doesn't synergize with anything, and he's only a 1/1. So like what? You now have a 1/1 unblockable? Like woohoo.
Yeah, I mean, 1/1s for 1, we've talked about it, really aren't good in almost any format. They're particularly not good in this format, which is just too slow. Like when we've played test games, even a much better 1-drop like Devoted Retainer, what it happens is it swings in twice and deals 2 damage, and then it does nothing for the rest of the game. I'm like, this guy's going to do even more nothing for the rest of the game. I think green is a color that's particularly poorly positioned to take advantage of this kind of effect, because green is all about 4, 5, and 6. It's all about getting the beefy mid-range threats out there. Like, there's just no reason to run this card.
Yeah, not at all. And again, I've sort of felt this way about almost all of the human monks that we have seen and will see. But why isn't he a snake?
Here.
Like if we're gonna, you can see that Wizards like wanted human monks to sort of be part of the landscape of green in this block, but there's such a boring part. Like there's no synergy between them. They don't really have any sort of coherent theme in terms of like activated abilities or triggered abilities or anything like that. They're all a little bit different and mostly pretty boring. Nothing really ties them together thematically. And I actually looked to see I wanted to see like why green monks in this set, and is this a thing anywhere else in Magic? Mm-hmm. And it pretty much is not. So there's 23 green monks in all of Magic.
What percentage of all monks?
15 of them. Oh, that's a good
I'll work on that one. You keep ranting.
All right, work on that. Yeah, I'm going to keep going here. 15 of the 23 green monks in Magic are either in OG Kamigawa or Neon Dynasty. That leaves 8 other green monks in every other set that's ever been printed.
Mm-hmm.
One of those 8 monks, Thelonite Monk from Fallen Empires, is an insect monk cleric, which is already more interesting than any of the human monk cards in this set.
That is a heck of a type line right there.
Isn't that great?
That's a great type line.
Really boring card.
Super boring. So there are 103 monks in total in Magic. So white leads the pack, as you'd expect, with 42 monks. Green is actually number 2 at 23. There's 15 blue monks, 10 red, and 1 lonely black monk.
There's 1 black monk?
Yeah, it's a flip card from Saviors of Kamigawa, as you'd
wow.
expect. And actually, it might have the best art of any flip card. I'm just going to throw that out there now, looking at it.
Whoa.
Yeah, Kuan, Ogre Ascendant. I don't want to spoil that discussion, though, for a few months from now. One thing I will say for this thing, I wouldn't say the art is exceptional, but it's really technically well realized. It's a better piece than this card deserves. And I'm looking, and it's actually by Therese Nielsen, and I think you can see that this is by one of Magic's strongest artists. It's very kind of strange and spooky in its energy. It's got an unusual composition and pose. It's both painterly and yet realistic. I don't know. It's really nice.
Yeah. At the same time, it feels like something you could theoretically see in a museum.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I need to load up on Jukai Messenger foils. This is 31 cents in foil.
Is the cheapest foil.
If this did not have
31?
a Therese Nielsen art, I guarantee you this would be even less than 31 cents.
That seems like a lot.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's collecting this for their Forest Walk tribal deck. Insta cut. Okay, next up, Kami of the Hunt. 2 and a G for a 2/2 spirit. Whenever you play a spirit or arcane spell, Kami of the Hunt gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Oh man, this card. So this card, I think, doesn't read that great, and it reads better than it plays in my experience. Like, I think this card could basically read at the beginning of your upkeep, flip a coin. If you win the flip, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Because in practice, basically what seems to happen with this thing is it's usually a gray ogre. It's a 2/2 for 3. Occasionally it's a 3/3. Very, very, very rarely it's a 4/4. Almost never does it matter. Like in green, you can just get better creatures at 3 than this thing. Gnarled Mass, for example, is just a straight 3/3 for 3, which this might sound strange, but that was constructed playable at the time this came out. That was a revolutionary card. But anyway, like green has 3-drops in the set that are not conditionally a 3/3. So there's just not much reason to play this thing.
I kind of have a grudge against this card because I think it's probably the card that I have the most of in green.
Oh, really?
As far as the cards in boxes under my bed. I think I have more Kamis of the Hunt than any other card in green from this set. And close to the most of any green card I own at all. I think number 1 is Simic Ragworm, which is maybe even more forgettable. I have like 24 Simic Ragworms. But it felt like this thing just popped up in every single pack, and I didn't like it at any point when it popped up. Like what bothers me about this is you're right. It does read better than it plays, and if it got +1/+1 counters instead of a temporary +1/+1,
you're going pretty far there for Kamigawa block, my friend.
Yeah, you would be going pretty far, but it would be like such a tank and still kind of reasonable. Maybe not in Kamigawa, but like as a newer card.
Yeah, I think this thing could get like +2/+2, or maybe just +1/+1 and trample, just something to give it it doesn't need that much more oomph, but just a teeny bit of oomph. Vigilance, maybe just give it vigilance all the time or something.
Yeah. Well, that'd be pretty weird in green.
Green gets vigilance now, but I think you're right. At this time, I don't think they'd really decided on that.
Well, and this was the first set that had vigilance as a keyworded ability.
That's
so
right.
I think it was like supposed to be very much part of the samurai.
See, that's another example where they were so tied up in the flavor rules that play design took a back seat. I had this in a Meh 1X, but honestly, I could see cutting it. Not because it's terrible, but just because it so rarely does what you think it's going to do. It's just kind of like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about having it in as a Meh 1X, then
that's true.
Kind of what's the point? It doesn't really serve a purpose the way that Joyous Respite might.
Right, where that's just a unique
It's
effect.
just kind of another creature. Yeah. Right.
All right, let's just cut it. I will say I think the art here is okay. It kind of reminds me of Spirited Away. It reminds me of the like goo monster no face guy from Spirited Away. I wonder if it was inspired by that. But I like the art.
A lot more teeth. Yeah.
Huge teeth. All right, let's go to another card that proves you really got the short end of the stick in this episode so far. That might change later.
Yay. We've got Kashi-Tribe Reaver, 3G for a 3/2 Snake Warrior. Whenever it deals combat damage to a creature, tap that creature, and it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. You can also pay 1G to regenerate Kashi-Tribe Reaver. this has always felt like a really disappointing card to me, mostly because I tried to build a snake deck back in the day. I think there was maybe even a snake like pre-constructed deck.
Oh wow, I'll go work on that while you keep going here.
Yeah, to fact check me on that. But this is one of a few snakes that kind of fills out the mid range of the snake deck, and it's just not that exciting. A 3/2 for 4 mana is not great. Obviously, the sort of snake poison ability of tapping down a creature and keeping it tapped for a turn, basically like freezing it, is not very exciting. It feels underwhelming for what snakes should be doing, which feels like it should be death touch or something.
Yeah, it is I've always thought that too. It's a very funny signature ability. It's not bad. It's just kind of it doesn't have that much effect typically on the game in my experience, but it's fine. I feel like that snake ability is okay-ish, but the regen is what you're really here for. And I think that's worth it. I think it's basically a hill giant that can regen and has some minor upside, and I think that's good enough-ish in Kamigawa.
Yeah, I think the regen is real and makes this better than the next mid-range snake we're going to look at. Yeah, it's just a tough one to be very happy about.
So I did a fact check. You have a great memory. This was part of the Snake's Path expert level from back when they did that pre-constructed deck, which is a deck that would cost $13.12 to reconstruct in paper if this hadn't happened to have a Sensei's Divining Top in it, which is like a $60 card now, which is great.
Oh man, I wish I still had that top somewhere.
I'll put a link to the MTG Goldfish copy of this deck in the show notes. Honestly, I kind of want to go play like a Kamigawa Precon v Kamigawa Precon.
I think that'd be a lot of fun
too.
There was like a black Nezumi deck, I want to say, that had Jite in it. So there's like at least two pre-constructed decks in Kamigawa where almost everything in there is worthless, but then there's one card that's like the most broken card in the entire block that is worth far more than the pre-constructed deck.
Yes, the one that had Jite in it. What was that? I think that might have been the Ninja deck.
I think it was
the Ninja Precon.
Was it? I think it was Nezumi or something.
I remember one time, at the time Jite was whatever, like a $40 card, and we found 2 copies of that Precon at our local grocery store, and we were over the moon. It was a big day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we've gotten a little bit far afield here. I have one more thought actually on the Kashi-Tribe Reaver, which is that I really dislike this art. I think there's something goofy about it. Like, I know she's a snake person, but she's kind of too long, too awkwardly positioned. Like, I can't tell really where she is or what she's doing or how she's possibly balancing herself like this. And her hair is like 20 feet long. I just think it's too goofy to me.
It's kind of too dynamic, and it's very comic book.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
It's very comic book vibe. There's like so much movement happening. There's so much foreshortening with one of her arms coming out holding the sword. And it's like, it's a lot to take in for a card that is not a lot to take in.
Yeah, okay, before we settle on inclusion, let me just get you all 5 Kamigawa Precons. Let's just get this out of the way. So in white, we had Way of the Warrior. No points for guessing what the theme was there. Connor, what do you guess the theme is? You won't get points, but I still want you to guess.
Oh, I didn't know this was on me. Way of the Warrior? I mean, that's literally Bushido.
That's correct. That is the white Bushido deck.
Nailed it.
Okay, next. And let's make this whole thing a guessing game. Okay, next up. This is going to be a lot harder. Spirit Bane. Put some thought into it.
Boy, there's a lot of ways that could go. Bane is kind of a like black sounding word, but then like the red shamans really hate spirits. Yeah. Give me a hint.
Yeah, so who is the meanest to spirits in a mechanical sense in this set? Who really dunks on spirits? Did I just make it harder?
I mean, I feel like red does thematically, but not very well. Not very effectively.
No, you got there. It is actually the red one with Kumano and friends. And yes.
Really?
Okay, you're on a roll.
And that's just such a forgettable like cycle of cards. I'm surprised they made a deck.
Hearts go out to anyone who bought this with 4 copies of Aki Avalanchers and 3 copies of Aki Rock Speaker, among much else.
But I mean, what else could you do with a red theme deck?
Well, I mean, you could have given them a single Glacial Ray, which you don't get in the entire deck, because I guess it's not spirit themed. So that just seems like harsh. Okay, two more.
Hmm.
Two more. Oh no, one more. Kami Reborn. What colors do you think you're looking at there?
Colors. Black and green.
You got that right. Yes, black and green. And this was back in the day when Wizards had a rule you could only get like 2 rares in a precon. And this is going to hurt. One of the rares is Iname Death Aspect, and there is no Iname Life Aspect in it. Instead, you get a long forgotten Gohei. Now, what is that about?
What?
I know, isn't that brutal?
Well, they got to keep you searching for something.
That's just wrong. I'm going to come out here and say that. That's just immoral. Okay.
Was that all of them?
That's all of them. There's only 4, which is weird.
Okay. Well, I've completed my fact check of the GTED deck.
Yep.
And it is a Betrayers of Kamigawa theme deck called Rat's Nest.
So you're saying it is rat themed,
which is Nezumi themed.
Wow.
Featuring Umezawa's Jite and Patron of the Nezumi.
Man, I know I couldn't have kept all the packaging from my childhood, but I would give a lot to still own the packaging for these things.
Yeah, good stuff.
Okay, so I think we forgot to name a quantity for this. I have it as a
What are we doing?
Just because it seems fine to include, but I can't imagine ever wanting more than one versus any number of other cards.
I feel like we should have 2 copies of this if snakes kind of end up being a thing in the cube, because there is a bit of tribal synergy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some good snake lords.
If they end up being a thing, I feel like we need 2 of these. And if snakes don't end up being a thing, then I say no copies.
I could be surprised by this. I don't think I want to go to no copies because there's not a lot of regeneration. And I like highlighting that as a thing that existed at this era in Magic.
Okay. Should we start at 2 then? And then?
Yeah, 2's fine.
With 1 being soft floor.
Okay, let's go to our other Kashi-Tribe member, Kashi-Tribe Warriors. 3 GG for a 2/4 Snake Warrior. Whenever Kashi-Tribe Warriors deals combat damage to a creature, tap that creature, and it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. This, unfortunately, is the end of the card. It's just that snake ability. There are just a lot of better things to do at 5 and green. There's not that many as you would think, perhaps, but there are a lot of other green 5-drops, like the next card we're going to talk about, that are just way, way better and way more interesting than the Kashi-Tribe Warriors. And I can't include it I don't have the heart to put this in my cube. There's just nothing about it that excites or interests me.
This is the other mid-range snake that I was alluding to. And it's the Reaver, but with a worse rate and no regen. It's just like, why bother?
Yeah, I don't know why it's not like a 3/5 or I don't know, something. Or maybe, why doesn't it have reach? Why not just give this thing reach?
Yeah, I mean, they're up in the trees in this art.
That's true. They're literally way up there in the trees.
Speaking of the art, I wanted to point out that there are 3 different Kashi-Tribe snakes in Kamigawa block. This is the second one, of course. And all 3 of them look super different from one another. These Kashi-Tribe Warriors look like a completely different snake than the Reaver. And both of them look like a totally different snake.
That's true. She's a lime green.
She is lime green. These guys are gray, basically.
Yeah, a little bit purple, maybe.
I can't remember what the third one was, but it also looks different.
Kashi-Tribe Elite and Saviors.
Yeah, there we go. And that kind of looks like it's very lizardy looking snake.
Can I just, as a teaser, read you the first line of Kashi-Tribe Elite's flavor or rules text?
I think I can guess what it is, but
it's
go
not
ahead.
What you think. It is legendary snakes you control have Shroud.
Wow. You're not going to find that text on any other card.
No, I think that will remain unique text for all of Magic's history.
All eternity. What a great snapshot.
Kashi-Tribe Warriors, are we pretty agreed this is an easy insta-cut?
Yeah, let's just get it out.
Just too forgettable.
Okay, finally an exciting card for me.
Yeah, we had a tough run here.
Yeah, I needed something to look forward to, and this was it. Kodama of the North Tree. 2 GGG for a 6/4 legendary spirit with trample and shroud. So this is just obviously much more powerful than almost any other creature that we've seen, just in terms of raw stats and mana and having trample. You know, there's not a lot going on here complexity-wise, but this is just a big, beefy, legendary spirit that's going to make your opponent's life pretty hard.
Yeah, he's just a big old ball of stats and keywords, and it totally works. He's kind of like the questing beast of Champions of Kamigawa. Now, he's not quite questing beast in terms of impact, but In Champions, I think he's almost similarly threatening. Like, we've had a few test games where you've resolved this against me, and every time it's like, oh my God, like, am I just losing? Like,
Yeah, like what do you do about
or
this?
am I just trading 2 or 3 creatures and taking a couple damage? Like, this thing does work, let alone if you manage to soul shift it, then it's just like the game is over.
Yeah, he really brings the pain. Little lore tidbit here. Just since we're going to be on a bit of a Kodama streak for the next 2 cards.
It's Kodama from here to the end of the episode, actually. Nothing but Kodama cards.
Oh, you're right. There's just a ton of Kodamas. So we got to put this out there now. Kodamas are tree spirits in Japanese folklore, which, works out well for Kodama of the North Tree. And it turns out that the phenomena of a delayed echo in a forest is sometimes attributed to them in Japanese folklore. So if there's some echo in a forested valley, then it's said that the echo coming back is actually a Kodama.
Yeah, I think the little forest spirits in Princess Mononoke, the ones with the rattling heads, I think they're also called Kodamas canonically. Because if you Google Kodama, that's what comes up.
This one's a little different.
Yeah, he's a little less snuggly, a little more terrifying. The art here is awesome, by the way. It's terrifying and sort of powerful, and it has the Kami fantastical elements, but it's not so far into fantastical that you can't tell what's going on. Like, he's clearly very threatening and advancing on the viewer rapidly. He's scary looking.
Yeah, I kind of like that about this card. Like it looks very muscular and threatening, but in a way where it's really hard to figure out even what the basic shape of this thing is. There's a lot of cool detailed elements in there, like his hands sort of look like fans.
Yeah, I think they are. They're like giant bladed fans, clawed fans.
He's got this big dripping tongue Zubera style tongue.
He's got a little mask embedded in his face.
Yeah, aside from that, it's pretty hard to tell like what this even is.
Yeah, I think he's got one eyeball on his right side of his body, but on the left side of his body in an equivalent position, he has 5 arms. Yeah, he's really kind of unsettling and scary looking. It's great art.
Yeah. Yeah. And unsettled and scared is how you're going to feel when he's trampling toward you.
Yeah, and it's also, the other thing I like about the art is it's scary, but in a green way, right? It's not like it's moving into the black kind of horror space. It's still very bestial looking, but it manages to also look intimidating. Yeah, great piece.
Yeah, for sure.
This card reminds me a lot of Weatherseed Treefolk, the classic recursive 5-drop, 5/3 trampler that comes back to your hand. And, not as good, but I think it's got a similar kind of beater role, and it can really beat down.
Yeah, it's definitely going to beat down in the cube.
Yeah, I think it's an auto include, right? 1X auto include.
It is for me.
And by the way, this commands 6 decks on EDH Rec, so hands off to the people somehow building a deck around a 6/4 Trampler Shroud. You can't even put equipment on them, so like it's not even a Voltron deck. What are they doing with this thing?
They're just trampling.
Yeah, all right. I respect it. Okay, let's turn to the next Kodama. That's right. There's a Kodama of the North Tree, and he's accompanied by a Kodama of the South Tree. 2 GG for a legendary spirit. 4/4. Whenever you play a spirit or arcane spell, each other creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains trample until end of turn. The first Kodama is a real card. This is absolutely also a real card. +1/+1 and trample to everything on your board is such a big boost. Like, this thing is really a game-ending threat when it comes down. It's kind of terrifying that it's just 4 mana, to be honest, because starting the turn after you resolve this, like, I don't know, you're easily getting like +5/+5 in stats across your board, or maybe even +10/+10 if you double spell. I think this is one of the strongest Spiritcraft triggers in the set. Just super powerful ability.
My first thought when I saw this was Kami of the Hunt.
Yeah, the poor Kami of the Hunt really suffers by comparison.
He really does. So there's, they're so close, both in stats, not really in stats, but in cost, in the kind of trigger, which is also +1 here, but in a kind of more substantial way. And the Kami of the Hunt just looks so miserable. Costs 1 less for 2 less stats, and such a worse trigger.
Yeah, this was an era where Wizards wasn't afraid to make commons like really bad and similar rares really good. Like, obviously that's always part of the game. They got to sell packs, but I feel like back then it was a lot more sharp a distinction. Whereas now I feel like even a lot of commons and certainly many uncommons now are fun, interesting, playable cards. Whereas back in this day, like, a lot of your commons are just, you might as well just put them in a recycling bin.
Yeah, just shove them under the bed with the Kamis of the Hun and Simic ragworms.
I also love, from a flavor perspective, I love that there's a Kodama of the North tree and the South tree, and there's a Kodama of the Center tree in Betrayers. And then in Neon Dynasty, the most recent Kamigawa set this year, they revisited that cycle and completed it with the Kodama of the East tree and West tree. And if these Kodamas are good, those Kodamas are stupid good, or at least they would be if they appeared in the set. So I love that they went back and finished that cycle.
Yep, they've completed the Kodamas.
This commands just 21 decks on EDH Rec. It actually appears at 733, which isn't amazing, but it's not nothing. I assume people are just sticking this into Bant Spirit tribal decks or something, but I was kind of happy to see that Kodama of the South Trees managed to make a bit of a name for himself.
That raises a question for me. Which Kodama do you think is better, both in our cube and just overall?
Oh, wow. It's hard to say. So I think overall, Kodama, I don't know about overall exactly. I think Kodama of the South Tree is certainly a more interesting card, right? It tickles your brain more than Kodama of the North Tree. And I think North Tree is more clearly outclassed, I guess, by other cards, because at the end of the day, it's just a beater, right? So you could just compare its stats and abilities against other big, fat, dumb creatures. And I suspect it would come up wanting against any number of others. Whereas Kodama of the South Tree does something pretty much unique. Yeah, therefore, I think the South Tree is sort of a generally more interesting card, more playable in a broader context. Maybe even if you had a non-Kamigawa cube with the strong spirit theme, you could put it in. Although if I would hate that word arcane. I think that's just confusing. In our cube, I think it's much closer, but I think I'd still give the vote to Kodama of the South Tree. Like, the body isn't that much worse. Like 4/4 is still a very real body, and then boosting your whole team is it's a lot. It's a lot to get for 4 mana in the set. I'm surprised this doesn't cost 6.
It's weird comparing this to Iname. Like, this is just a 4 mana 4/4 with a really, really good Spirit Craft trigger.
Yeah, I mean, this can save a creature if you do something tricky. This can pump up your whole team for kind of an overrun effect, because they all gain trample too. Well, even if it was just +1/+1, I'd be here for it. But then you throw trample on top, and it's like, I don't know, you're getting pretty close to being able to get an overrun effect every turn. It's like a planeswalker.
There should be a Kodama Planeswalker.
Oh yeah, that's next Kamigawa set in another 18 years. I want a Kodama Planeswalker. Yes. Kodama Ascended or something. Connor, before we move on, what in the heck is going on in this art?
Ooh, I'm glad you asked. I'm not actually, because it's really hard to explain or figure out where to start with this. It's a big bug?
Big bug covered in organs.
With a lot of like organs and like pussy looking. It looks like kind of half of a really gross anatomy drawing from a textbook grafted onto a bug.
Yeah, I wish this wasn't so gross, frankly.
I don't understand the connection to really anything here. to the South Tree, to the...
Yeah, what about this is rallying your other creatures?
Look at the flavor text, too. I'm just reading it now for the first time. The monks of the South Tree had always reveled beneath their Kodama's friendly gaze. I cannot imagine anyone reveling anywhere near this thing, let alone it having a friendly gaze. Like, which part of it is even doing the friendly gazing?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it is kind of disconnected. And even the tree part, it's like, I don't know. Where are the trees in this? Actually, if you look at it, it's kind of like, is this thing like 4,000 feet tall? Because it kind of looks like there's some scrubby trees and mountains.
I think those are supposed to be trees. And it's like, it's crossing a river.
It's freaking weird.
Which it is larger than the width of.
And that adds up to a 4/4. Pretty confused art.
While the North Tree is just this small kind of muscly thing.
Yeah, he looks like he's about maybe 7 feet wide based on the trees behind him.
Yeah.
I think it's still an easy auto include though. At a 1x.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, our third Kodama card is not a Kodama, but is an instant. It's Kodama's Might. G for an instant arcane. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn, and it has Splice onto arcane for G. This is pretty much an auto include for me, mostly because of the splicing, but also just like this is a really solid spell to have in green in this block specifically. It's kind of strictly worse than Giant Growth, at least in terms of just stats, but this is Kamigawa that we're talking about, so frankly we don't have Giant Growth.
Yeah, this card is great. Giant Growth is, I don't know if too good is quite right. I don't know if it's quite too good, but Giant Growth is good, I guess. It's a really genuinely solid card. It's a card they only sometimes print, I think in part because it's a really big pump. It really can make a big difference. And I think +2/+2 is adequate. Not amazing. It's not +3/+3, but it's adequate. And then, yeah, as you're saying, the splice thing here is very real. If you splice this even once, let alone twice, you're feeling great. That's a total of +4/+4 off a single card and just 2 mana. That's a totally reasonable rate. And I really like this card. To me, this is one of the most iconic arcane spells, actually.
And it's a splice card that, you know, you would want to have a lot of the time. There's some splice cards where you're looking for the situation where you actually want to cast it, and then you also need to have something to splice it onto. You know, there are so many situations where you're going to get some value out of splicing this.
Yeah, it's a solid pump spell. It's going to fill a role. It's not the most splashy or flashy card, but it's almost always going to get into your green deck, and you're almost always going to be happy to have one or maybe even two of them. They are really good together, actually. Like having two Kodama's Mites in your deck is wonderful.
Yeah, I think splicing this onto itself is good stuff.
So I have this as an auto include. Sounds like you have it in auto include too. So I think it's really just about quantity then.
I think so. I went with 4 mostly because I like it and I like the idea of having as many of these as possible. But I don't know if that's excessive. Like it is pretty strong, and I don't know if having that many of them floating.
Yeah, I don't know if it's even too good so much as like I feel like 4X is rarefied air. Like I think we've only put like 1 or 2 things at 4X. Candles Glow, of course. Our iconic
Candles
4X
Glow
card. I think for a hot minute I had Aki Avalanchers at a 4X, and then we realized that was a terrible idea.
You sure did.
You know, and apart from that, we really haven't put much else at that 4X slot. Wicked Akuba, it looks like we put in at a 4X. And Glacial Ray. You know, I like the Glacial Ray comparison. I think this is not quite as good as Glacial Ray, but it fills a similarly important role in green.
Yeah, it is kind of a green ray.
Yeah, something about it to me, just 4 just feels like a lot. Does the deck really want more than 1? Or certainly I don't think you want more than 2 of these in a deck, right? Like I don't think you put 3 of them in. That's just too much dead weight. Too many times you have 2 Kodama's Mites and no creatures.
Yeah, but I guess the question is how many do we want floating around in the draft, right? Because having 4 versus 3 is going to obviously affect how often it shows up. Yeah, maybe 4 is too much. We got to keep that special.
Yeah, that's got to be reserved for the truly iconic cards like Candles Glow.
For the Candles Glows.
Yeah, you know, one of those first cards people name.
Yes, the cards everyone knows and loves. I can't wait for that deck to come together.
All right, should we start at 3?
Yeah, let's start at 3.
All right, let's close things out with one more Kodama card and what is actually, I would say, the most famous and certainly the most played card from this entire set. Kodama's Reach. Kodama's Reach is 2 and a G for a sorcery arcane, and it says search your library for 2 basic land cards. Reveal those cards and put 1 into play tap and the other into your hand. Then shuffle. All right, so Kodama's Reach is, as I said, by far the most played card from the set, and actually one of the most played cards in Magic, if you consider the popularity of EDH. This is played in fully 35% of all EDH rec decks, and if we assume that's similar to the overall proportion of EDH decks on the planet, that's basically 1 out of every 3 EDH decks in the world runs a Kodama's Reach. It's the number 11 most played card in the entire format. It's the number 6 most played colored spell in the entire format. It's played in 15% of cubes. Like Kodama's Reach shows up all over the place. And I suspect it's probably the card most responsible for anyone remembering what Arcane is or that it exists.
Definitely.
I'll say in our format, I think it's pretty good. I don't think it's as exceptional as you might think from the stats. I feel like ramp and cube and limited, pure ramp often kind of disappoints me. You know, it's sometimes just not worth going down a card in a limited sense just to go up on lands. I mean, you're not literally going down a card, right? This is kind of like Divination. You draw 2. And I think like Divination, this card is pretty good and limited, but it's not, I don't think it'll be cube defining, for example, in the way it's format defining in EDH.
Yeah, probably not. And I think you're right that the value in a cube is not the same as it is in Commander, especially if you have, you know, a wacky multicolor, like 3 or 4 color Commander deck that you're running. Kodama's Reach is a lot more valuable.
Yeah, and in Commander, you're trying to get to like 8-10 mana, right? Like you want a ton of mana in Commander.
Right. Well, you're trying to get to 10 lands for Budoka Gardener.
That's true. This is best buddies with the Budoka Gardener
in this format, so.
And it plays well with Sweep, you know, the iconic Savior's effect that lets you return lands to your hand. Who doesn't like doing that?
Yes.
Actually, it plays going back to the land thing that we talked about with Azusa. It plays nice with the Moonfolk, gives you more fodder.
Yeah. I mean, you got to get them out there first. I guess one of them you already get out there and then gives you one more to play and then bounce.
I think I'm actually warming to this a little more. And green is, I think, the most expensive in mana. Maybe not the most mana hungry color, but it's close. It's got a lot of expensive cards, some of which are pretty hard to cast, as we've been talking about. There's a lot of double and triple designated cards in green.
I mean, I don't think the value proposition is quite as good here as it is in EDH, but I do think I'd be pretty happy to draft this, especially if I was trying to push into a more multicolored kind of deck. Like this is so great for that.
Yeah, even when ramp isn't good, which I don't think it always is good, but I always enjoy ramping. It's just a fun thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I have this as an auto include, mostly just on like star power.
I like star power. I had it as playable, but I think you're right. Regardless of what I think about its actual power level, I can't have a Kamigawa block cube and not include at least one or two copies of the most notable card from Kamigawa in terms of play rate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so then we're just litigating quantity again. So I have this at a 2x just because I don't know if you want that much ramp running around. Where do you land?
I mean, I was saying 3x, but I don't know. It's hard to know how much is too much for this because you get one and you're happy with that. I think.
I guess one question is there a ramp deck? Like, is there a green ramp deck in this format? There are some very expensive things, right? Like Vine Kami, 1,000 Lane Kami. Like there are 7 and 8 drops. So I don't know if there might not be a true ramp deck, but there are very expensive things you're trying to cast in green, especially.
Yeah, maybe it is 3 then, because then you've got some at least some theoretical ramping you want to do. You've got the kind of multicolor possibilities that it hopefully opens up. So maybe we do go with 3 and bring it down to 2 if it's just showing up too much.
Yeah, I love the art here too. For me, Kodama's Reach has gotten some other art over the years. I don't know why. This art is perfect, as is.
Yes. You want to describe it?
Yeah, actually, for a Kamigawa card, it's relatively easy to describe. It's a kind of barren landscape bordered by a forest, and emerging from the forest is a hand made of like woods and vines, and it's surrounded by some kind of floaty leaf kami. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward for a Kamigawa arcane spell.
Yeah, that about sums it up.
And it just works. It's like the hand is reaching out and it's revitalizing this barren landscape. Like it just works well with the effect. It's simple. It's iconic.
Yeah, the art and the flavor text kind of line up nicely here. The flavor text says, "The land grows only where the kami will it." And then you can see this Kodama's hand is it's literally reaching out of the woods and like spreading the forest. It's kind of weird, actually, that the flavor text says, "The land grows only where the kami will it."
Why? Sorry, I'm not parsing why that's weird.
The land doesn't grow. I mean, literally, the land from your deck grows, I guess, but it's a forest that's growing, right?
Yeah, but this can fetch non-forest. That's interesting. Yeah. Huh.
Terraforming, Kodama's terraforming reach.
Yeah, there you go. Before we move on, I want you to I DM'd you the other 3 Kodama's Reach arts. So there's a secret lair drop with a cat, like an illustration of a cat.
Oh, that's cute.
Super cute. But these other two, they keep insisting on printing, especially the middle one here.
Mm-hmm.
The one where it's just like a green arm floating over a forest. I think that's goofy. I think that's nowhere near as good as the original Kodama's Reach art.
It's pretty weak. It's one of those art pieces where it's like it could be a creature, it could be a spell.
That's true.
It looks like it's something giant awakening as opposed to like spreading particular land. It's just kind of contextless.
But they've given up on the original art. They haven't printed that original art since 2017. Every printing since 2018 has had different art.
That's a tragedy.
It is, because I think this one's better. And, this recent one they threw in the Neon Dynasty Commander set, I think is even worse. It's just like, here's some vines.
Tendrils and vines. Yeah, it sort of ties back to the original a little bit, right? We've got like this barren little patch on the right side, and you can see that the jungle is reaching out and expanding.
Yeah, but it doesn't have the punch of it.
But yeah, it's definitely weaker.
You know what it could be? It could be the icon for an ability of a druid in an ARPG, like in Diablo or Titan Quest or something.
Zoom in on part of this.
Yeah, this summons vines.
Yep, grasping vines.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, I like 3x. I think we should push the envelope on this thing, and if it's too much, we can always dial it back.
I like it.
All right, and that is it for today's episode. Hopefully this episode was a joyous respite for all of you, as it was for us. And I hope that our extended discussion of other art and other cards and all kinds of weird history topics wasn't too much of a Kodama's reach for all of you in our audience.
Boy.
I just made that one up live, Connor.
Yeah, that's a good one.
If you have feedback or thoughts or memories to share about any of the cards or topics today, or especially about any of the cards that are coming up in later episodes, you can always email us at clockspinningpodcast@gmail.com, or better yet, comment on Reddit. That helps us discover the show. It lets other listeners see your thoughts. So we always love seeing comments there. If you want to see the cube as it evolves, you can follow along on Cube Cobra. Just go to clockspinning.com for a link. And then next week, join us as we finish green. We got 25 more green cards, and then we're done with the colored spells of champions. It's been quite a journey. Until then, though, I'm Austin.
And I'm Connor.
Thanks for listening.